Hello, my YouTube audience, and welcome back to my channel, Crime Whisper. I know many of you enjoy listening to these stories as you drift off to sleep, so before we begin tonight's tale, I'd love for you to leave a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe now. Let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case story. 1. Dasaki Mariyama was a respected known throughout Shiojiri for his exemplary conduct, integrity, and the admiration of the public. Yet, on the first anniversary of his late wife's death, something strange happened during a televised interview. When asked about his feelings, Dasaki broke into a fleeting, forced smile. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but chilling enough that millions of viewers noticed. Social media exploded. Many claimed they saw not sorrow in his eyes, but a quiet satisfaction. Some even called it the smile of a killer. Overnight, the image of this upstanding assemblyman began to crack. Dasaki Mariyama was also the current custodian of Shagakuskizo, a symbolic brewery owned by his family for generations. The brewery's emblem, a benevolent turtle, represents joy, longevity, and prosperity. Over the years, the Mariyama family had maintained and developed the brewery, making it a source of pride for Shiojiri residents. Now, Dasaki carried on this family legacy, while also serving as a Nagano prefectural assemblyman at home. Dasaki's life seemed picture perfect. He lived in a comfortable 2-story house, shared with his gentle, supportive wife, Numi, and their 2 well-behaved sons, one in middle school, the other just starting elementary school. On the first floor, Dasaki maintained a private office for brewery work, spending countless hours there, often late into the night, and it was in that very office where our story begins. On the morning of September 29, 2021, a seemingly ordinary Wednesday, Dasaki was in Nagano City for assembly work, planning to stay overnight at home. Only Numi and the children remained. Around 6:45 a.m., the younger son awoke to get ready for school. As he descended the stairs, he noticed something unusual. The door to his father's office was slightly ajar, always locked at night. It should have been secure. Curious, he pushed it open and froze. In the center of the room, near the safe, lay his mother Numi, motionless. Her face was pale, unresponsive, terrified. The boy screamed, waking his older brother. Both rushed to her side, desperately trying to wake her, then shakily called their father. Dasaki, over 37 miles away in Nagano City, panicked, but immediately instructed his sons to call emergency services. By the time he arrived at his home, the scene was chaotic. Yellow tape cordoned off the entrance, and emergency vehicles lined the driveway. Lights flashing. Medical personnel had arrived promptly, and, upon seeing the unusual signs on Numi's body, immediately alerted the police. In minutes, the house that had always been filled with laughter had become a cold, grim crime scene. The preliminary forensic report stunned investigators. Numi Mariyama had died sometime between 1 and 3 a.m. The cause of death was not natural. It showed clear signs of external force. In other words, this was likely a murder. The 2 children, the only witnesses, were interviewed in a state of shock. They said the last time they saw their mother was around midnight, when she had been downstairs, seemingly working. After that, they returned to their rooms, hearing nothing unusual. Investigators soon noticed strange details. There were signs of a minor struggle near the safe, but no valuables were disturbed. The safe itself was intact, locked, and untouched. All doors and windows in the house were secure, with no signs of forced entry. This ruled out a typical burglary, given the circumstances. The husband Dasaki Mariyama became the primary suspect, arriving exhausted, panicked, and over 37 miles away from the crime scene. He could not avoid scrutiny. Yet Dasaki quickly asserted his innocence and provided what appeared to be a solid alibi. He explained that the night before, he had stayed in Nagano City after a dinner and drinks with fellow assemblymen. Following a late meeting, rather than driving back to Shiojiri, he stayed at the assembly lodge. working through the night on an important document for the assembly. He even presented the completed document as proof, and colleagues who had attended the dinner corroborated his story, confirming that he had indeed remained in Nagano that evening. And that is where this chilling case takes its first twist. Despite Dasaki's alibi, the police remained cautious. After all, in cases like these, appearances can be deceiving, and a meticulously planned crime can look like an accident or natural death. Investigators meticulously combed through the house for any clues that could point to an intruder, confirmed the husband's innocence. They found fingerprints on the office doorknob and safe, but every print belonged to family members or household staff. No signs of forced entry, no footprints leading in or out, nothing to suggest an outsider had entered. It was as if the crime had been committed by someone already inside the house. Then, forensic experts noticed something chilling. The position of Numi's body suggested that she had been attacked from behind while seated or leaning near the safe. There were subtle bruises on her arms and a faint smudge of blood on the edge of the desk, but curiously, nothing was missing. No valuables, no money, no jewelry. It was almost as if the motive was not theft, but something far more personal. The investigation shifted focus entirely onto Dasaki. Detectives began to look for any signs of a troubled marriage, financial disputes, or hidden resentments. They interviewed neighbors, friends, and colleagues. On the surface, the Mariyamas were the picture of a harmonious, happy family, but as is often the case in such tragic stories, appearances can hide dark secrets. One detective noted the infamous smile caught on camera a year earlier. What if that fleeting expression had been a glimpse of something deeper, something that no one had expected? Social media had dubbed it the smile of a killer, and now, in light of this murder, many began to wonder, had the world glimpsed the truth long before the crime? Meanwhile, forensic analysis continued. DNA swabs were taken from the office, the safe, and Numi's clothing. Investigators examined digital footprints as well, emails, phone records, security footage from nearby streets, anything that could indicate whether Dasaki had returned home during the night. Everything initially pointed toward him being away, but the detectives knew better. Sometimes, the smallest oversight, a minor detail, can unravel even the most airtight alibi. The community of Shiojiri was stunned. The Mariyamas had long been respected. Their brewery, a symbol of pride and continuity, now whispers filled the streets, blending shock with suspicion. People who had once admired Dasaki began to question everything they thought they knew about him, and then, an unexpected piece of evidence surfaced. A tiny, seemingly insignificant clue that would eventually change the course of the investigation. A single security camera, hidden on a street nearby, had captured a shadow moving near the Mariyama residence between 1:15 and 1:30 a.m. The footage was grainy, almost impossible to decipher, but it hinted that someone had been at the house during the critical hours, someone who had not been accounted for in the official alibi. This revelation threw the case into chaos. Could it have been an intruder after all, or had Dasaki found a way to manipulate the situation, hiding in plain sight? Investigators would soon uncover a tangled web of secrets, lies, and betrayals that no one in Shiojiri could have imagined, suggesting Dasaki had neither the opportunity nor the time to commit the crime. One question haunted investigators. If he was truly innocent, then who could have struck so cruelly at Numi, and why choose that particular night? To understand, we must turn back the clock and learn about the woman at the heart of this story. Nozomi, 47 years old, born and raised in Shiojiri. Every street, shop, and alleyway of her hometown was steeped in the traditions of Japanese craftsmanship. Nozomi came from a prestigious family, renowned for their high-end lacquerware, ranked among the top 3 shops in Shiojiri, and sought after by collectors across Japan. Growing up in such an environment, Nozomi was meticulously educated, refined in her every gesture and word, and carried a serene, modest, yet confident beauty. After graduating from a prestigious university in Tokyo, she chose to return to her hometown, taking a role in the family shop's accounting department. Her talent and organizational skills quickly became apparent, earning her respect and recognition within the family business. It was during this period that fate brought Nozomi together with Dasaki, a promising young businessman they met through a local young entrepreneurs organization, and a swift connection blossomed into love. Supported wholeheartedly by both families, their marriage was celebrated with admiration across Shivers, seen as a union of two respected and successful families, a golden couple embodying the hopes of the younger generation. But beneath the surface, the marriage was far from perfect. Shortly after their wedding, Dasaki faced an immense burden. He was forced to take over the family brewery following his father's sudden death. A man trained in economics with no experience in brewing, Dasaki had never set foot in a fermentation room, nor tasted fermenting sake. What had been intended as a promising career trajectory in Tokyo abruptly ended, replaced by the weighty responsibility of the family business. The early years were disastrous. Dasaki struggled to learn the trade from veteran brewers, yet his batches were often cloudy, harsh, and bitter and drinkable. Even by loyal customers, once proud patrons abandoned the brand, and some distributors went so far as to pour defective casks into drainage ditches to express their disappointment. Experienced craftsmen left, some retiring early, others moving to other workshops. In a few short years, the prestigious Shagok brand fell into decline, burdened with plummeting sales and mounting debts. It was in these difficult times that the first cracks in Dasaki and Numi's marriage began to appear, in stark contrast to her husband's inexperience. Numi was meticulous, organized, and capable after marriage. She devoted herself entirely to reviving the brewery, often stepping in where Dasaki struggled to support the family and protect their shared honor. Numi's father invested a substantial sum into the brewery, rescuing the faltering business from bankruptcy. Yet this very support highlighted the growing imbalance between the couple. A capable husband, now overshadowed by a wife whose abilities surpassed his. Aided by her family's backing, could this disparity, this quiet shift in power and competence, have sown the seeds for the tragedy that followed? Years later, during an interview marking the first anniversary of Numi's death, the world saw a side of Dasaki that shocked millions sitting before the camera. He blinked steadily, his voice detached and indifferent. When asked about his feelings, he replied coldly, "People have been talking about this all year." But actually, nothing much has changed then. Almost imperceptibly at first, the corners of his mouth curved into a strange, unsettling smile entirely inappropriate for the occasion. The moment was captured on live television, and it sent chills across Japan's social media. Erupted thousands of comments, flooded posts about these, with many questioning the sincerity of his grief and speculating about what lay beneath that eerie, forced expression. In that instant, the image of the devoted husband began to unravel, leaving behind a sense of unease that would only deepen as the investigation unfolded. In the days following Numi's death, investigators began peeling back the layers of the Maruyama household, searching for motives hidden beneath appearances. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues were interviewed, and slowly, a portrait of a seemingly perfect family began to shift. The children, still traumatized, were carefully questioned again. Their accounts were consistent. They had heard nothing after going to bed that night, yet forensic experts noticed subtle details they had previously overlooked. A faint smear on the office floor, a slight disturbance in the arrangement of papers, and traces of a chemical residue near the safe. Nothing overtly incriminating, but enough to suggest that someone had been at the house in the hours leading up to the tragedy. Meanwhile, Dasaki's alibi held strong on the surface. Colleagues confirmed his presence in Nagano City, and digital records showed he had indeed submitted the document he claimed to have been working on. But detectives remained suspicious. Alibis, they knew, could be carefully constructed. Sometimes the truth hides in the smallest discrepancies. and the overlooked details that seem insignificant at first glance. Then came the first breakthrough. A neighbor recalled seeing a shadowy figure near the Mariama residence around 1:20 a.m., moving in a manner that suggested someone had intentionally approached the house. The footage from a nearby security camera, though grainy, seemed to support this. A figure, unidentifiable but unmistakably present, lingered near the house before disappearing into the darkness. The question now was clear. Who was this mysterious visitor, and why target Numi Mariyama at that exact hour? Motive, opportunity, and timing all pointed toward someone with intimate knowledge of the household. But who could it be? A jealous competitor, a disgruntled employee, or perhaps someone even closer, someone the Mariyamas trusted completely. As investigators dug deeper into Numi's life, they discovered the painstaking efforts she had poured into the brewery, her meticulous attention to detail, her hands-on approach, and the constant pressure to save the family legacy had earned her both admiration and envy. Several former employees hinted at tensions within the business, arguments about management decisions, clashes over the handling of funds, and, perhaps most intriguingly, resentment from individuals who had been passed over for promotion or recognition at the same time. Detectives began examining Dasaki's financial and personal life, though outwardly calm and composed. A subtle pattern of stress emerged. Letters, emails, and private notes revealed a man under immense pressure, fearful of failure, desperate to maintain the family name, and quietly frustrated by the very support that kept the brewery afloat. Was this stress enough to push him towards something unthinkable, or was someone else exploiting his vulnerabilities? The investigation had reached a critical point. The stage was set for the truth to emerge, but it would require patience, precision, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities. One thing was certain: the case of Numi Mariyama's murder was far from simple. Beneath the serene facade of the Mariyama family, dark currents of ambition, envy, and desperation had been quietly swirling, and one of those currents had finally erupted into tragedies turned into weeks. And the investigation pressed on. The police scoured every corner of the Mariyama residence, re-examining the office, the safe, and the surrounding property. And then, at last, a breakthrough arrived. Not flashy, but subtle. The kind of clue that often cracks even the most carefully constructed facade. Near the baseboard of Dasaki's office, investigators found a tiny fiber, almost invisible to the naked eye. Under forensic analysis, it was identified as a rare type of fabric used in high-end Japanese gloves, the kind often worn for delicate handling of valuables or machinery. The fiber didn't match anything Dasaki or the immediate household possessed. It was a trace left behind by someone who had carefully entered the room, someone who had handled items with precision, someone familiar enough to avoid leaving obvious signs of struggle. Then came another discovery: fingerprints on the edge of the safe. Not all of them. Some belonged to family members, but one set was unusual, partial, smudged, and nearly imperceptible. Yet it did not match any Mariyama family member or employee. On record, this was the first concrete evidence of an outsider, or at least someone attempting to disguise their presence. Investigators also examined digital evidence more closely. Security camera footage from nearby streets revealed intermittent movements during the night, showing a figure approaching and circling the house multiple times before disappearing. The images were grainy, but the person's gait, height, and the way they held their arms suggested someone cautious, deliberate, and prepared. It was no random intruder. This was calculated. Detectives turned to the Mariyama family's personal circle. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues were questioned in painstaking detail. Slowly, a picture began to emerge of a woman caught between her husband's faltering confidence and her own competence. Someone who had earned admiration, but perhaps also jealousy. There were whispers of minor disputes over the brewery's operations, disagreements with staff, and tension with those who resented the success that Numi had helped engineer. And Then came the most disturbing revelation of all. A series of letters hidden in Numi's personal desk, carefully tucked away. They detailed threats she had received over the past months, cryptic warnings from someone who seemed to know the house intimately. Someone who had the audacity to demand influence over the family business. Some notes were overtly hostile, others subtle, but each carried the unmistakable undertone of menace. All these pieces, small on their own, began to coalesce. There was clearly a third party involved. Someone with knowledge of the Mariama household. Someone who knew the routines of the family. And someone who struck with precision. Yet, even with these clues, a question haunted the detectives. How had this person chosen that specific night? Why between 1 and 3 a.m.? And, most chillingly, what had driven them to act with such cruelty against Numi, Mariama? The investigation was entering its most critical stage. The threads were being pulled, the web of secrets unraveling, and every new piece of evidence brought the police closer to a truth more shocking than anyone could have anticipated: the infamous smile. Many believed Dasaki's behavior during that interview was deeply abnormal. Throughout the segment, he blinked rapidly, avoided direct eye contact with the reporter, and spoke in a disconnected tone, as if trying to suppress emotions or hide something. But it was that fleeting, inexplicable smile that drew the most attention. Some netizens interpreted it as a smile of satisfaction, an unconscious reflex of someone who believed their plan had succeeded. Others drew comparisons to a famous episode of Detective Conan, in which a character meticulously plans to murder his wife, constructs a flawless alibi, and pretends to grieve. Yet, in a single subtle moment, a smirk reveals the truth detected only by the astute detective. For many, Dasaki Mariyama's real-life smile evoked that same chilling effect. It transformed him overnight from a respected politician into the prime suspect in a mysterious and brutal murder. In criminal psychology, it's often small, seemingly harmless behaviors, an evasive glance, a forced smile, or an unconscious gesture that betray a person's true intentions under extreme stress. As the interview circulated, public opinion quickly turned against him within weeks. The narrative that Dasaki was directly involved in his wife's death dominated conversations across Japan. Yet, despite the public storm, he continued his political appearances. A month later, with only 6 months remaining in his assembly term, Dasaki stepped confidently onto a campaign podium in Shiojiri before a crowd of voters and reporters. He smiled, his voice steady. He vowed not to be defeated by his wife's death, promised to care for his children, and expressed his intent to run for re-election. But just 1 month later, before his re-election campaign could even begin, police arrived to arrest him on charges related to Numi's murder. The news spread like wildfire across Nagano Prefecture. His failure to submit candidate registration documents meant his term officially ended. His political career abruptly halted. In reality, suspicion had never left him from the first days of the investigation. Police had sensed inconsistencies in his statements over several months. They monitored him quietly, collecting evidence, piece by piece, until a clearer picture began to emerge. The first point of doubt centered on his whereabouts on the night of the murder. While colleagues confirmed he had attended a dinner in Nagano City, no one could verify his location after the party. The hours between midnight and dawn, time window long enough to drive the 37 miles to Shiojiri, commit the crime, and return, remained unaccounted for. To test this theory, investigators launched an unprecedented, large-scale inquiry. Every possible route between the Assembly Lodge and the Mariyama residence, including minor roads rarely used, was scrutinized. Hours of traffic, camera footage, store security recordings, and residential cameras were collected and analyzed meticulously over weeks. And then came the breakthrough. Among thousands of frames, a white car appeared repeatedly 6 times on different cameras along the secluded route. These cameras were deliberately located away from major highways, the type of route someone would choose to avoid. Detection police examined the vehicle in detail. The frames revealed 2 small dents on either side of the license plate, and a long scratch near the left rear wheel. These details matched Dasaki's car perfectly. Further inspection of the dash cam revealed that a segment of footage had been deliberately deleted, coinciding exactly with the time frame of the murder. Evidence was mounting Dasaki's carefully constructed alibi. The hours he claimed to be working alone in Nagano City was now under severe scrutiny. The investigation was closing in, and the subtle cracks in his story were beginning to harden into something undeniable. Someone very close to the Maruyama family, someone with access, knowledge, and motive, had acted, but the question remained, was it this, or had another hand orchestrated the crime under the cover of night? The night of September 29th, the night the crime occurred, was finally reconstructed with chilling precision. Although Dasaki had tried to erase all traces of his movements, technical experts were able to recover auxiliary data and GPS positioning, allowing investigators to map his route. The journey perfectly matched the footage from the 6 cameras along the secluded route at 11:20 p.m. Dasaki's car left the assembly lodge in Nagano City by 12:50 a.m. It appeared on camera near a small office in Azumino City, along the route to Shiojiri at 1:44 a.m. Another camera captured the vehicle moving slowly near the residential area where the Maruyama house stood, coinciding precisely with the time frame of Numi's murder. About 90 minutes later, the car was recorded again northeast of the house. It then continued north via back roads, avoiding main highways, and returned to the assembly lodge by 5:07 a.m. The journey was complete, nearly 6 hours of calculated travel, using small roads to evade traffic cameras, had placed him at the scene of the crime at the exact time the murder occurred. Further evidence came from the computer document Dasaki had presented as his alibi, while he claimed to have spent the night working at the lodge. Technical analysis revealed the document had been drafted long before the murder. There was no sign of editing during the critical hours, completely undermining his story. Then came the most damning physical evidence: fingerprints found near the safe, where Numi had collapsed, matched Dasaki. A search of his residence uncovered a pair of sneakers with sole patterns identical to shoe prints at the crime scene. The combination of the suspicious car trajectory, the falsified alibi, fingerprints, and shoe prints created a compelling case directly implicating Deso Kyoto. He continued to deny all charges. Prosecutors formally indicted him as the investigation deepened. The motive behind the shocking crime began to surface. One key factor was Dasaki's prolonged extramarital affair. Intertwined with financial disputes over the brewery, investigators discovered that throughout his marriage, Dasaki had maintained a secret relationship with a woman named Ms. Sito, a subordinate employee who had worked at the brewery for 25 years, widowed for several years herself. Ms. Sito was respected and beloved in the office for her gentle, diligent nature. Dasaki had been drawn to her and pursued the relationship. Fully aware of both of their family's circumstances, rumors of their affair spread quietly through the office, eventually reaching Numi one day. Suspecting something was wrong, Numi traveled to Nagano City herself and witnessed her husband and Ms. Sito. Together she recorded the discovery in her electronic diary, expressing shock, desperation, and intense anger despite being confronted. The affair continued in secret for 3 years, until Numi's father discovered it. Furious, he demanded that Dasaki either end the relationship or resign as assemblyman to protect his political career. Dasaki cut ties with Ms. Sito, but, in his heart, his desire for her never waned. 3 months before the murder, he encountered Ms. Sito again on the street, seeing it as a rare opportunity. He confessed his intentions. He claimed he would divorce Numi and marry her. Ms. Sito firmly rejected the proposal, but Dasaki persisted. Investigators later uncovered emails between the two, showing that after Numi's death, Dasaki expressed passionate concern for Ms. Sito and declared an intense desire to marry her this stark contrast between his indifference toward his wife and his obsessive devotion to his mistress painted a disturbing picture that would ultimately expose the true motives behind the murder. As the investigation unfolded, the web of deceit around Dasaki Maruyama became impossible to ignore. All the pieces, the reconstructed movements, the falsified alibi, the fingerprints, the shoe prints, and his secret affair pointed toward a chilling truth. The murder was not a random act of violence, but a carefully planned crime. Investigators turned their focus to the final, crucial questions: the exact motive, and how Dasaki had orchestrated the murder so meticulously. Beyond the affair, financial tensions in the family brewery provided the missing piece of the puzzle. Numi's father had invested heavily to save Shigatsuka's and while this had rescued the business, it also meant that Numi increasingly wielded influence over brewery operations. Dasaki, struggling to maintain control, felt both overshadowed and humiliated by the growing divide between his perceived authority and his wife's capabilities. The night of September 29th was reconstructed hour by hour. At 11:20 p.m., he left the lodge in Nagano City, navigating back roads to avoid detection. By 1:44 a.m., he arrived near the Maruyama residence, fully aware that Numi would likely be alone. Using his knowledge of the house's layout, he entered the office. No forced entry required, and executed the crime with chilling efficiency. The safe, valuables, and household items were untouched, signaling that this was personal, not a robbery. Evidence of the premeditation grew stronger. Emails between Dasaki and Ms. Sito revealed that he had expressed frustration over his inability to openly pursue the relationship, hinting at deep-seated resentment toward Numi. The investigators concluded that the murder was driven by a combination of passion, jealousy, and financial power struggles, a lethal mix that had been simmering for years. Once the evidence was compiled, police arrested Dasaki Maruyama. The news shook Shiojiri and all of Nagano Prefecture. A man once admired for his integrity, a prominent assemblyman in the face of a respected brewery, had been unmasked as the prime suspect in a brutal murder. The community's shock was compounded by the infamous smile that had haunted them for months, now seen not as a fleeting quirk, but a sinister prelude to the truth. During the subsequent trial, the details of his affair, the financial pressures, and the meticulous planning of the crime were laid bare. The courtroom heard how Dasaki had manipulated his alibi, traveled under the cover of night, and attempted to erase digital evidence, all in a bid to hide his guilt. The combination of digital forensics, surveillance footage, fingerprints, and footwear evidence created a near irrefutable case. The verdict sent shockwaves throughout Japan. Dasaki Maruyama was convicted of murder with aggravating circumstances, a dramatic fall from grace for a man who had once seemed untouchable. The case left a lasting impression, a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that even the most respected individuals can harbor secrets capable of shattering lives. And so, the story of Dasaki Maruyama and the tragic death of Nozomi Maruyama became a cautionary tale, not just about crime, but about human obsession, betrayal, and the dark impulses that can lurk behind the calmest of facades. 3 years after the incident, in October 2024, the full picture of Dasaki Maruyama's actions finally emerged. Despite his outward composure and repeated denials, the evidence had long painted a different story. His emails to Ms. Sito after his wife's death revealed an obsessive persistence. Though she repeatedly rejected his proposals, Dasaki continued to pressure her, claiming he could provide her with happiness and insisting that their union was inevitably. At these communications also revealed a deeper truth about Dasaki's character, one that had been visible since his youth. Classmates recalled a quiet, serious boy, reserved and diligent. But after passing the entrance exam to a prestigious prefectural high school, Dasaki changed. He became more flamboyant, playful, and even unruly at times. Relationships with classmates especially women, became frequent and flirtatious stories circulated of his excessive boasting about his life in Tokyo, and even incidents of drunken impropriety. This pattern of arrogance and entitlement continued into adulthood when he took over the family brewery. Dasaki's management style clashed repeatedly with his wife and her family. Continuous financial losses forced him to borrow approximately 40 million yen, around $270,000, from Numi's mother's family. Money he never repaid, while Numi tirelessly worked to keep the brewery afloat, raising funds, seeking brewing experts, and maintaining operations. Dasaki increasingly neglected his responsibilities. Preferring parties and political engagements, employees gradually left, and the brewery's decline deepened. The tension between husband and wife reached a breaking point. Dasaki considered selling the brewery and even contemplated divorce, while his father-in-law warned that, without repaying the borrowed funds, he would lose family support in politics to dissent. This was intolerable. The wife who had helped sustain both his business and his family had become an obstacle to the life he desired. It was around this time, 3 months before the murder, that Dasaki encountered Ms. Seto again. Believing it to be fate, he resolved to pursue a new life with her. Every detail of the plan was meticulously calculated. He finished the document he claimed to work on at the Assembly Lodge, coordinated an evening out with colleagues in Nagano City to create an alibi, and planned his travel along small, surveillance-free roads on the night of September 29. Everything appeared to go according to plan. Dasaki left the lodge at 11:20 p.m., drove home under cover of darkness, committed the murder, and returned along a pre-planned route. To avoid detection, he believed the execution was flawless, yet, as often happens in even the most carefully orchestrated crimes, the smallest details betrayed him. Shoe prints left beside Numi's body, surveillance footage from small roads along his route, and the timing of his movements created a trail. Investigators could follow what Dasaki thought were minor traces became the critical evidence that ultimately revealed the truth 3 years later. The story of his calculated crime, his obsession, and the betrayal that shattered a family became a chilling reminder. Even the most meticulously executed plans can unravel, and justice, though delayed, can still find its way. The trial of Dasaki Maruyama captivated the nation. Courtrooms in Nagano Prefecture were packed with reporters and spectators eager to witness the unraveling of a man once revered as a politician and businessman. From the very first day, the prosecution presented a meticulous case, layer by layer, combining digital forensics, surveillance footage, fingerprints, shoe prints, and the damning emails exchanged with Ms. Sato. The courtroom heard chilling details of Dasaki's plan, his premeditated route, the falsified alibi, and his manipulations to conceal his movements painted the picture of a man who coldly calculated every step. Witnesses recounted the strained marriage, the financial disputes over the brewery, and Numi's tireless efforts to sustain the family business. The jury could see how personal obsession, ambition, and resentment had driven a man to commit an unthinkable act. Dasaki, in court, maintained a composed exterior. His defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial, insisting he had not physically committed the crime, and that someone else could have been responsible. Yet the combination of his phone records, the reconstructed travel route, and the forensic analysis left little room for doubt. Months of testimony and cross-examinations culminated in a tense verdict. The judge, after carefully weighing the evidence, delivered the sentence. Dasaki Maruyama was found guilty of murder with aggravating circumstances. The courtroom erupted with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and grim satisfaction as the sentence was read for Shiojiri and the surrounding prefect. The fall of Dasaki Maruyama was nothing short of dramatic. A man who had once smiled before cameras, admired as a symbol of family and civic virtue, was now branded a murderer. Public reaction was swift. Social media flooded with commentary. News outlets replayed the infamous smile, and many reflected on how outward appearances can deceive even the most vigilant observers. Numi Maruyama's legacy however, remained untarnished. The brewery, slowly rebuilt under the care of her family and loyal employees, became a symbol of perseverance and dedication. Friends and neighbors remembered her not just as a victim, but as a woman of integrity, skill, and quiet strengths whose life had been tragically cut short by betrayal and greed. The case of Dasaki Maruyama serves as a haunting reminder. Even the most calculated plans can fail, and the smallest traces left behind can expose the darkest intentions. In the end, justice prevailed, and the story became a cautionary tale that continues to intrigue and terrify those who learn its hand. So, the story of Dasaki Maruyama comes to an end, or, at least, that is how the world sees it. A man once admired for his integrity, a respected assemblyman, and the face of a beloved brewery, revealed to have harbored secrets darker than anyone could have imagined. The smiling politician, the seemingly devoted husband, and the calculating businessman, all facets of a man whose outward appearance masked a chilling truth for the people of Shiojiri and beyond. The case serves as a stark reminder. Appearances can deceive, and sometimes the greatest danger lurks closest to home. Justice, delayed but inevitable, uncovered the truth through patience, perseverance, and the tiniest traces left behind as you lay down tonight. Let this story linger in your mind, a tale of obsession, betrayal, and the lengths to which one will go to satisfy selfish desires. Remember, the smallest details often hold the deepest truths, and in the quiet of the night, secrets can never remain hidden forever. If this story captivated you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps keep these stories alive, whispering the chilling truths of human nature long after the lights go out. Till next time, stay aware, stay curious, and remember, the world of crime is never as simple as it seems. And like any master strategist, Shiratori meticulously studied the prison's routines, noting the guards' shifts, weaknesses in the facility's infrastructure, and the behavior of his fellow inmates. He waited for the perfect opportunity, a moment when the chaos and inattentiveness of the prison staff could be turned to his advantage. In the early hours of a cold winter morning in 1937, Shiratori executed his first escape, using tools he had secretly fashioned from scraps of metal and wood. He quietly unlocked a service door that led to the outer perimeter. Timing was critical. Guards were at their least vigilant during the pre-dawn hours, and Shiratori moved swiftly, silently, like a shadow slipping through the cracks of a broken system. Once outside the walls, he navigated the frozen landscape with uncanny precision, avoiding patrols and detection. Over the next few days, Shiratori survived on sheer instinct, foraging for food and seeking shelter wherever he could. Every step required careful calculation. One wrong move could mean recapture or death. Yet, despite the immense risk, he succeeded, vanishing from the prison without a trace. News of his escape spread rapidly, and Shiratori's legend began to take shape. He became known as the man no prison could hold, a figure whose cunning, bravery, and audacity captured the imagination of the public authorities. Embarrassed by the escape, redoubled efforts to recapture him, but Shiratori always seemed one step ahead. Each failed attempt to apprehend him only added to his notoriety over time. Shiratori executed multiple escapes, each more daring than the last, from scaling walls under the cover of night to exploiting blind spots in surveillance. His ingenuity seemed limitless. Prison officials grew desperate, resorting to stricter controls, solitary confinement, and even harsher punishments. Yet, Shiratori repeatedly found ways to slip through their grasp. But beyond the daring escapes and public fascination, Shiratori's story also reveals a harsh truth about the Japanese prison system of the era, system that, through cruelty and neglect, created the very conditions that turned an ordinary man into a legendary fugitive. His story is a testament to human resilience, cunning, and the desperate lengths a person will go to survive in the face of relentless oppression. And so, Shiratori's legend lives on, A dark, thrilling chapter in the history of Japanese incarceration. A man who refused to be contained, whose audacity and cunning earned him a place in history as a symbol of defiance and unbroken spirit despite the authorities' best efforts. Shiratori continued to evade capture for years. Each escape was bolder than the last, earning him a reputation that spread far beyond the prison walls. People whispered his name in awe, and the press sensationalized his exploits, portraying him as a cunning anti-hero who outsmarted the law at every turn. But Shiratori's life on the run was not without danger. He had to constantly change locations, adopt new identities, and remain vigilant, for even the smallest hint of betrayal or pursuit. Survival required more than cunning. It demanded endurance, resourcefulness, and an unyielding resolve. Eventually, in 1940, Shiratori was finally recaptured, but even in custody, his notoriety had preceded him. Prison officials treated him with a mix of respect and fear, recognizing that he was not an ordinary inmate. Unlike before, his reputation made him almost untouchable within the system, and guards became more cautious in their interactions. Shiratori spent the remaining years of his sentence reflecting on his life and actions. While some viewed him as a criminal, others admired his ingenuity and indomitable spirit. His story became a symbol, not of lawlessness, but of resistance against an oppressive system. A man who refused to be crushed by the machinery of injustice. In the decades that followed, Shiratori's tale of repeated escapes became legendary in Japan. It was recounted in books, newspapers, and later documentaries, capturing the imagination of generations. Prison historians often cite his story as a stark reminder of the era's harsh penal conditions, but also as an extraordinary example of human resilience and intelligence. Legacy is a paradox. A criminal whose audacity and determination turned him into a folk hero, yet whose life was a cautionary tale of the consequences of desperation, injustice, and the choices made under extreme circumstances. And so, the man no prison could hold continues to haunt the annals of Japanese criminal history, a figure both feared and admired, whose daring exploits remind us that sometimes survival itself can become the greatest adventure. And so, two stories from very different times, yet both leaving us with the same haunting truth. Human nature is as complex as it is unpredictable. A man of privilege and power, allowed selfish desire and obsession to drive him to the unthinkable. Shiratori, a man trapped by injustice and cruelty, turned desperation into audacious defiance. In both cases, small choices, hidden motives, and seemingly minor actions revealed the deepest truths about the people behind them. These stories remind us that the world we see, peaceful homes, respected leaders, and even rigid institutions, is often only a surface. Beneath it lies a world of secrets, desires, and human frailty. Justice may come, legends may be born, but the echoes of betrayal, fear, and cunning linger far longer than we expect. As you lie down tonight, let these tales linger in your mind. Observe carefully, for even the smallest gesture, the faintest detail, may hide the most chilling truths. And remember, whether it is in a modern city or decades ago in a distant prison, human choices can lead to consequences that forever alter lives. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where in the world you're watching from. Your engagement helps keep these chilling whispers alive, reminding us all that truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds a way to surface. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and remember, the shadows of human nature often hide in the places we least expect. Escape with the wire. He carefully picked the lock of the handcuffs, freeing his wrists without making a sound. Next, Shiratori focused on the cell itself. Over months of observation, he had memorized every weak point in the structure, the slight cracks in the walls, the loose mortar near the ceiling, and the ventilation shafts that led to hidden corners of the prison under the cover of darkness. he quietly dismantled part of the wall near the ventilation shaft, squeezing through inch by inch until he reached a narrow corridor. Behind the cell blocks, each movement had to be precise. One misstep could alert the guards or trigger an alarm. Patience and timing were everything once inside the corridor. Shiratori climbed through a series of service tunnels, avoiding surveillance and the roving night guards. Hours passed like minutes as he silently navigated the labyrinthian paths. By dawn, he had reached the outer perimeter walls, using rope he had fashioned from bedding over weeks. He scaled the walls and dropped to the ground outside, disappearing into the surrounding forest. This escape was unlike any before. Shiratori had learned from his previous mistakes. He left no obvious tracks, avoided roads and settlements, and carried only essential supplies. Moving like a shadow in the early morning mist, the guards discovered the empty cell at first light. But by then, Shiratori was long gone. News of his second escape spread like wildfire, cementing his legend. A man no prison could hold. Authorities were humiliated, and the public watched in awe and disbelief as Shiratori once again defied one of the most brutal prisons in Japan. Yet, behind the legend, Shiratori's story was also one of survival. A man forced to fight against an unjust system, relying on wit, skill, and unyielding courage to live another day. Shiratori's subsequent years would be marked by a series of daring escapes, recaptures, and relentless pursuit each time he was caught. The prisons tried to break him, but his ingenuity and determination kept him one step ahead. Over time, his story became a symbol of defiance and resilience, remembered not only as a criminal, but as a master strategist who outwitted the system at every turn. Even today, historians and criminologists study Shiratori's escapes as extraordinary examples of human ingenuity and survival instinct, showing how extreme circumstances can push a person to feats that seem impossible. Eventually, after years of eluding capture, Shiratori was finally apprehended for the last time. Unlike before, the authorities recognized that traditional methods would not suffice. He was placed in a high-security facility, specifically designed to prevent further escape. For the first time, the relentless manhunt and his ingenuity were finally subdued by meticulous planning and extreme security measures. Yet, even in confinement, Shiratori remained unbroken. His sharp mind, careful observation skills, and unyielding spirit had carried him through unimaginable suffering. While the law had finally contained his physical freedom, the legend of the man no prison could hold had already escaped far beyond the walls of any jail. Stories of his cunning, courage, and determination spread across Japan, transforming him into a symbol of resistance against oppression, a figure who showed that even the most rigid systems could be challenged by human intellect and willpower. Today, Shiratori's tale continues to inspire fascination and awe. It is studied by criminologists, recounted in documentaries, and whispered among those captivated by extraordinary feats of survival. But underlying all the legend is a sobering truth. Survival often comes at a steep cost, and the line between heroism and criminality can blur when desperation meets ingenuity. Closing crime, whisper reflection. Both the tragic story of Dasaki Maruyama and the legendary escapes of Shiratori remind us of the complex, shadowed depths of human nature. One man allowed desire and ambition to destroy a life and family. The other turned extreme adversity into a cunning fight for survival. In every case, the smallest decisions, the tiniest details, and the hidden motives left indelible marks on victims, families, and history itself. As you rest tonight, remember, the world is rarely as simple as it seems. Behind every calm home, every respected official, and even the walls of the strictest prison, secrets, cunning, and human instincts are at work. Pay attention. Notice the small things, and never underestimate the power of hidden motives. If you've been captivated by these stories, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep these whispers alive. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, And remember, the shadows often hide more than we realize. Cold concrete floor. But Shiratori had learned to endure far worse over the next several weeks. He carefully studied the patterns of guards at Abashir. Just as he had at his previous prisons, he noted every routine, every slight lapse in attention, and every hidden vulnerability in the facility's supposedly escape-proof design. Unlike his prior escapes, Shiratori knew that brute force or simple lockpicking alone would not suffice this time. He had to combine patience, ingenuity, and a profound understanding of human behavior over months. He secretly gathered small items, bits of wire, cloth, and even pieces of scrap wood every night. He worked quietly, sometimes fashioning tools from the meager items allowed to prisoners. Finally, one stormy night, when icy winds howled and guards were distracted by the blizzard outside, Shiratori made his move, using his wire and makeshift tools. He unlocked his handcuffs, carefully dismantled parts of the window frame in his cell, and climbed to freedom. Unlike previous escapes, he had also prepared for survival. Outside, warm clothing hidden in a drainage tunnel, food caches left in unlikely places, and a precise route to avoid patrol. Shiratori slipped into the frozen darkness and vanished, leaving the guards dumbfounded for weeks. The authorities scoured the region, but he was nowhere to be found. His meticulous planning, patience, and mastery of stealth made him untouchable even in the harshest environment Japan could offer. Eventually, Shiratori's story of persistence and cunning reached the ears of reformers and the public, who were shocked by the cruelty he had endured while the law had repeatedly tried to punish him. His escapes revealed glaring flaws in the justice system, ultimately sparking debates about prison conditions and human rights in Japan. Though Shiratori was eventually recaptured, his legend as the man no prison could hold endured. It was not merely a tale of crime, it was a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the unyielding desire for freedom, even under the harshest conditions. Shiratori's repeated escapes and the extreme conditions he endured left a lasting mark not just on the prison system, but on the psyche of those who followed his story. Each time he vanished, whispers of admiration and fear spread among the populous. People debated endlessly. Was he a cunning criminal, or a man forced to defy a cruel system in the pursuit of justice and dignity? In prison, Shiratori's behavior also inspired other inmates. Many tried to emulate his methods or strategies, though few succeeded. The mere knowledge that a man could outsmart even the most secure facilities gave them hope, and sometimes the courage to resist abuse or fight for basic rights. Meanwhile, authorities became increasingly obsessed with him, doubling security measures, tightening routines, and imposing harsher punishments to prevent any further escapes. Despite the repeated setbacks and betrayals, Shiratori never lost his sharp mind or resolve. He remained vigilant, observing every change, noting every weakness, and waiting for the perfect opportunity. Each escape attempt became a demonstration of his unmatched resourcefulness, an intricate game of patience, observation, and daring execution. Over time, Shiratori became more than a fugitive. He became a symbol to some. He was the embodiment of the human spirit's resilience against oppression. To others, a warning that no prison could contain a mind as cunning and determined as his. His story, marked by brutality, cunning, and unwavering perseverance, continues to echo through history, a chilling reminder of how far one man could go to reclaim his freedom and dignity. Shiratori endured the bitter cold and relentless surveillance of Abish. He realized that escaping physically was no longer his only goal. He began to shift his focus toward outsmarting the system in ways that would protect his dignity and expose the corruption around him. Even in the harshest conditions, he found ways to communicate discreetly with sympathetic guards, carefully document abuses, and maintain a network of information that could one day help him make his case to the outside world. Despite being confined in near isolation, Shiratori's mind remained sharp and alert. He studied routines, memorized every patrol pattern, and crafted meticulous mental plans for potential opportunities, though he knew the odds of another physical escape were slim over time. His story of survival, ingenuity, and endurance spread beyond the prison walls. Smuggled letters, whispered accounts, and newspaper reports made Shiratori a legendary figure, a man who could not be truly imprisoned, not because of strength or weapons, but because of intellect, perseverance, and an unyielding will in the end. Shiratori's legacy was not merely about his escapade, was about the resilience of the human spirit. Under extreme adversity he showed that even in situations designed to break a person, the mind could remain free, and ingenuity could triumph over cruelty. The story of Yoshi Shiratori serves as a stark reminder of injustice, but also as an enduring testament to courage and cunning in the face of insurmountable odds. And so, dear listeners, as you close your eyes tonight, remember, sometimes the most terrifying prisons are not made of stone and steel, but of secrets, corruption, and human weakness. Yet, even in the darkest places, the human mind can find a way to survive. Into Escape Legend of Yoshi Shiratori, showcasing the ingenuity, patience, and sheer willpower that made him a symbol of defiance against an oppressive system. Visitors gaze in awe at the tiny vent he squeezed through, the handcuffs, and the replica of his cell, amazed at how a single man could outwit what was once considered an inescapable fortress. Shiratori's story remains a testament to human resilience. The idea that even in conditions designed to crush the spirit, intellect, creativity, and determination can triumph. He wasn't merely a fugitive. He became an icon of survival, teaching that extreme circumstances often reveal the true extent of human potential. His escapes were not reckless acts of rebellion, but carefully calculated demonstrations of how ingenuity and courage can bend even the harshest constraints. And so, the tale of Yoshi Shiratori continues to inspire generations, a haunting yet fascinating legend of a man who refused to be broken, a man who turned the impossible into reality through patience, intelligence, and unyielding resolve. After escaping Abashir, Shiratori disappeared into the snowy wilderness of Hokkaido. The harsh winter was unforgiving, but his meticulous planning and survival skills allowed him to evade capture for months. He relied on abandoned cabins, forests, and his deep knowledge of the land to stay ahead of the relentless manhunt. Every step he took had to be precise. One wrong move could mean death in the freezing temperatures, or recapture by authorities. During this time, Shiratori became more than a fugitive. He became a symbol. Stories of the man no prison could hold spread among locals, and even reached urban centers, inspiring awe, fear, and fascination. People whispered about the man who defied iron bars, cuffs, and guards. A man who had turned escape into an art form. Some claimed he had supernatural strength. Others said he had mastered the impossible through sheer intellect and patience. Shiratori made contact with sympathetic allies in secret. Some were former acquaintances who knew of his skill and cunning. Others were locals disillusioned with the corruption of the prison system. These allies helped him survive, providing food, shelter, and intelligence about patrols. Through them, Shiratori was able to communicate evidence of corruption and abuse within the prisons to officials outside the system. He leveraged his legendary escapes to demand reforms, proving that his actions weren't simply for personal gain. They were a statement against injustice. In time, his story reached national attention, forcing the government to address the severe issues within Japan's incarceration system. Shiratori's life became a complex legend, a man who was simultaneously a fugitive, a survivor, and an unintentional reformer. He transformed public perception of prisoners, showing that even under the harshest oppression, determination, intellect, and patience could make the impossible possible. Despite his legendary status, Shiratori remained a cautious and elusive figure. He never sought fame or wealth. His true victory was survival and the eventual exposure of systemic abuses. His tale is remembered as a saga of resilience, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of freedom against all odds. A reminder that even when trapped by circumstances designed to break a person, the human spirit can prevail. A sting altogether, the once fierce and unbreakable man now appeared almost lifeless. His energy spent from decades of survival, imprisonment, and repeated escape attempts, Shirui had transformed from a symbol of defiance into a shadow of his former self. Yet even in this state of apparent resignation, Shiratori's mind remained sharp. He began observing the guards' routines, noting the smallest lapses in attention, the subtle patterns in their movements, and the minor inconsistencies in their shifts. Though his body had aged and weakened, his intellect and patience had not diminished. He understood that brute strength alone could no longer secure his freedom this time. Only cunning, timing, and careful strategy might. Days turned into weeks, and Shiratori meticulously studied the prison layout. He discovered that despite the heavy reinforcements, there were still overlooked vulnerabilities. A narrow drainage shaft behind the kitchen, a loose panel in the ceiling of the old storage room, and a delivery schedule that occasionally left the perimeter lightly monitored. He didn't act immediately. He waited for the right moment, knowing that impatience could mean death. In the winter of 1948, a severe blizzard struck Sapporo. Snow piled high against the prison walls, reducing visibility and delaying some of the guards' routines. Shiratori saw his chance that night. He quietly slipped out of his cell while the guards were preoccupied with storm-related emergencies. Using the drainage shaft and the loose ceiling panel, he navigated through a network of old maintenance passages that had long been forgotten by the prison staff. By the time the guards realized the lapse, Shiratori had already emerged outside the perimeter, blending into the stormy night like a ghost once more. Circulated among criminals, law enforcement, and the general populace alike, painting him as both a criminal mastermind and a symbol of human resilience. Shiratori's story did not end with his final disappearance. It became a cautionary tale, inspiring reforms in Japan's prison system, highlighting the need for humane treatment, better oversight, and fair judicial processes. Even today, historians and crime enthusiasts recount the extraordinary life of a man who defied iron, snow, and time itself, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of criminal history. His legendary escapes took place, stands as a museum and monument to human resilience. Visitors walk through the cold cells, the reinforced bars, and the tunnels he once carved, marveling at how one man repeatedly defied seemingly impossible odds. Shiratori's story remains a testament not just to ingenuity and courage, but to the unbreakable human spirit, even when faced with cruelty, isolation, and despair's legacy continues to inspire criminal justice reforms, books, films, and countless stories of determination, patience, and survival against all odds. Yoshi Shiratori, the man no prison could hold, became immortalized not for the crimes he was accused of, but for the audacity, resilience, and ingenuity with which he defied every obstacle thrown in his path. Shiratori's story, alongside the modern tragedy of Deseki, presents a striking contrast between human cruelty, obsession, and the drive for survival. While Desuki's actions were driven by selfish desire and led to the destruction of a family and a community's trust, Shiratori's audacity and intelligence were born of injustice and the will to reclaim dignity in the face of brutality. Both tales reveal different sides of human nature, one of corruption, deceit, and premeditated malice, the other of resilience, ingenuity, and perseverance under the harshest conditions. In Shiratori's case, every escape, every calculated move, was a testament to patience, strategy, and an unyielding will to survive. For Desuki, every lie, every falsified alibi, and every betrayal highlighted how ambition and personal desire can warp morality and destroy life. These narratives remind us that human choices, whether driven by greed or survival, carry consequences that ripple far beyond the individual. One man becomes a cautionary tale of crime and betrayal, another a legendary figure who challenges the limits of the human spirit ultimately. These stories endure not just as historical records, but as lessons. The fragile nature of trust, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the extraordinary strength and ingenuity that can emerge when one refuses to submit to injustice. They resonate because they expose the extremes of human behavior, both dark and inspiring, leaving indelible marks on the societies they tutor. Tori's story, especially his legendary Abashiri escape, has become a permanent fixture in Japanese cultural memory. Visitors to Abashiri Prison Museum still marvel at the ingenuity and determination that allowed one man to defy what was considered impossible. Exhibits show life-sized recreations of his cell, the rusted handcuffs, the vent through which he slipped, and the wooden floorboards he painstakingly removed through these. The museum immortalizes not just his escapes, but the broader injustices of the pre-war and wartime Japanese prison system. Shiratori stands as a symbol of resilience and human ingenuity in the face of oppression, a man who refused to let the cruelty of others define his existence. Meanwhile, the Daisuke Maruyama case remains a sobering reminder of the personal tragedies that can erupt from greed, desire, and betrayal. News outlets and social media continue to dissect his political and personal life, analyzing how an individual trusted by an entire community could commit such a heinous act. For Shiojiri residents, his conviction and appeal hearings have become chapters in a story that still haunts families, serving as a cautionary tale of the consequences of unchecked ambition and deceit. When placed side by side, these two stories offer a stark contrast. One illustrates the destructive power of selfishness and obsession. The other showcases the extraordinary capacity of human will and intellect to overcome even the most impossible circumstances. They reveal the extremes of human behavior, how the same species capable of committing unfathomable crimes is also capable of incredible perseverance and brilliance. These narratives leave audiences reflecting on morality, justice, and survival. They challenge us to consider the choices we make, the systems we trust, and the resilience we can summon when faced with insurmountable odds. While one man's legacy is defined by fear and betrayal, the other is celebrated for courage, ingenuity, and an unbreakable spirit. Stories of Daisuke and Shiratori endure, not only in court records and museum exhibits, but in the lessons they impart, that human ambition can destroy as easily as human determination can endure, and that courage, patience, and intelligence can sometimes turn even the darkest circumstances into legends. The disappearance of Melody Roar retirement is often envisioned as a period of peace, free from the relentless pressures of work, deadlines, and hierarchical demands. For many, it's a time to explore dreams once postponed. For Melody Roar, a 64-year-old retired nurse, retirement was precisely that, a chance to fulfill a lifelong ambition. Traveling across the United States with her husband, Richard. Born in Michigan in 1957, Melody had devoted her life to nursing, serving at 2 major hospitals before finally retiring in 2017. Her dedication to her profession was unmatched, earning the respect and admiration of colleagues and patients alike. Yet, beneath her professional diligence lay a quiet longing for freedom. The simple joy of exploring the world without schedules, without alarms, without the pressing weight of responsibility. After leaving the hospital, Melody and Richard invested in a recreational vehicle. Their rolling home on wheels, they traversed the nation together, visiting friends, exploring forests, parks, and small towns, and immersing themselves in the unique rhythm of the American countryside. In April 2021, the couple stopped at Oak Shores Park near Lake Niles, a serene and picturesque location that immediately captured their hearts. The park offered a rare sense of tranquility, its morning mists, lake reflections, and whispering trees providing a perfect backdrop for leisurely walks, reflective moments, and the pleasures of simply being present in nature. The couple was so enamored with the place that they decided to stay for several months, using it as a base for their explorations each morning. Melody maintained a routine she had developed over years of disciplined practice. She would rise early, dress comfortably, and venture out for her morning walk, phone in hand to play music softly, keeping her senses attuned to the natural world around her. She avoided headphones to remain aware of the sounds of traffic, wildlife, and other people, a safety practice she had long adopted. Melody preferred Route 215 and the nearby Highway 84, enjoying the mix of shaded paths, quiet lanes, and open roads on these walks. She felt a rare sense of freedom, a connection with the land, and a momentary detachment from life's demands, a time solely for herself. However, the tranquility of that morning on September 20th, 2021, would be shattered in an instant. Melody left the RV as usual, around 8:15 a.m., dressed in her characteristic yellow rain jacket and shorts. Her husband, Richard, continued his morning routine, unaware of the looming disaster when she failed to return after nearly 3 hours. Richard began to worry. He attempted to call her, only to reach voicemail. Her phone appeared to have been turned off, heightening the urgency of the situation. Alarmed, he immediately contacted 911 at 11:29 a.m., reporting that his wife had gone missing. He provided a recent photograph, described her routine, attire, and health status, and emphasized that she was unlikely to leave voluntarily within an hour. Law enforcement responded. Patrol officer Jason arrived at the mobile home and began gathering details. He was joined by 2 colleagues. Officers Delwist and Everhard. Richard recounted every detail he could: Melody's usual route, her careful habits, her attentiveness to oncoming traffic, her avoidance of headphones while walking, and her exceptional physical fitness. She had no medical conditions that would inhibit her mobility, aside from a previous thyroid surgery, and had taken no medications that morning. Their long-standing relationship over 40 years had been characterized by love and stability, making it highly improbable that Melody would voluntarily disappear. The 3 officers initiated a coordinated search, splitting up along the roads and trails surrounding Oak Shores Park. Minutes into their search, Officer Everhard discovered a potentially critical piece of evidence on the north side of Highway 84. A yellow rain jacket. Abandoned in the roadside brush nearby lay a single shoe and a white Adidas baseball cap. The item's presence, their condition, and their arrangement suggested sudden displacement rather than casual loss. Investigators began to suspect a serious traffic incident might have occurred, rather than a simple wandering off. Next to the jacket, 2 deep tire tracks were visible, leading from the grass onto the roadway. The tracks suggested that a vehicle had made direct contact with the area, providing an initial point of reconstruction for the investigative team. The scene was immediately secured. Officer Everhard took control of the eastern intersection. Officer Delwist secured the western approach, and Officer Jason oversaw the site surrounding the discovered evidence. Their coordinated effort ensured that the integrity of the scene was preserved while waiting for the arrival of county detectives. Within the hour, detectives arrived to conduct a thorough investigation. The first task was to assess the scene and reconstruct potential events. They examined tire marks, footprints, and debris patterns. The placement of the rain jacket, shoe, and cap indicated a sudden incident, possibly involving a vehicle. The nearby terrain, a mix of soft soil, grass, and pavement, offered clues about movement and force, allowing the investigators to hypothesize the direction and manner of displacement. Interviews with nearby witnesses were conducted next. A jogger passing the area reported seeing a yellow blur near the roadside at approximately 8:45 a.m., describing a woman seemingly trying to cross the road while traffic moved along Highway 84. Another witness, a truck driver, recalled slowing his vehicle near the same location, but did not notice any collision. The absence of immediate reports from passers-by suggested that the incident was sudden, occurring in a brief fleeting moment that escaped attention. The detectives meticulously examined Richard's account. He confirmed the timing, Melody's route, and her typical behavior, her attentiveness. To traffic and cautious walking habits were consistent with her personality and training as a nurse, precautionary and observant. The evidence of her sudden disappearance, combined with the tire tracks and personal belongings, increasingly pointed to a possible hit-and run using the tire tracks as a key investigative lead. Law enforcement collected soil and residue samples. They noted impressions that could potentially be linked to a vehicle, type or tread pattern nearby. Surveillance cameras from local businesses and park facilities were reviewed, though initial footage revealed only fleeting glimpses of movement along Highway 84. The challenge of reconstruction was compounded by the length of time between Melody's departure and the discovery of her belongings, as well as the limited coverage of surveillance systems along the rural route. Detectives expanded the search perimeter. Foot searches, drone reconnaissance, and canine units were deployed, combing the roadside, wooded areas, and lakefront regions surrounding Oak Shores. Park teams meticulously documented footprints, tire impressions, and environmental disturbances, creating a comprehensive map of potential locations in parallel. Vehicle registration databases were with tire patterns and local traffic reports. Investigators began reaching out to neighboring counties to determine if any missing person reports or unusual vehicle sightings could correlate with Melody's disappearance. Richard remained at the scene, assisting authorities with additional details and recounting any unusual observations from previous walks. His testimony was critical in establishing a timeline and understanding Melody's habits, which would later become essential in reconstructing her last known movements. Emotional and distraught, Richard repeatedly emphasized that his wife was cautious, intelligent, and highly predictable in her routes. The implication was clear. Whatever had happened, it had occurred suddenly and without warning, leaving no opportunity for her to respond. Forensic analysis of the yellow rain jacket revealed minor abrasions along the sleeves and shoulders, consistent with a sudden impact or collision. Soil samples collected from the jacket matched the roadside earth, corroborating the location of the discovery. The single shoe, slightly scuffed, suggested a loss during movement, while the cap's position indicated it had likely been displaced by force rather than removed voluntarily. Tire tracks were carefully measured and photographed, revealing width and tread depth suggestive of a light-duty vehicle, potentially a sedan or small SUVs. The day progressed. The investigation expanded to include interviews with residents and park visitors. Witness statements provided fragmented pieces of the puzzle. A local delivery driver mentioned swerving to avoid an unseen pedestrian earlier that morning, while a nearby camper reported hearing a sudden thud near the roadway. Each account, while individually inconclusive, collectively created a pattern indicating that Melody's disappearance involved an external factor, most likely vehicular in nature. Detectives also examined the environmental context. Oak Shores Park, while serene, contained several hazards: narrow roadways, limited visibility due to bends and tree cover, and frequent wildlife crossings. Highway 84, in particular, had a slight incline with a blind spot near the section where the jacket and shoe were discovered. The forensic team noted that this combination of factors could have contributed to a sudden incident, reducing the likelihood of immediate eyewitness recognition by evening. The initial scene analysis had concluded. Though the search and investigation continued into the night, evidence was collected and cataloged for further testing, including DNA sampling, fiber analysis, and metallurgical examination of debris. Investigators maintained a meticulous chain of custody to preserve the integrity of each item, aware that any procedural error could compromise the case. The first 24 hours were critical. Authorities issued a regional alert, circulating Melody's description, photograph, and last known whereabouts. Media coverage began, drawing attention from local news outlets, and alerting nearby communities public assistance was solicited, requesting anyone who might have seen her or a vehicle matching the tire tracks to come forward. Social media amplified the reach of the alert, spreading awareness beyond immediate geographic boundaries. Over the next several days, investigators pursued multiple leads. Vehicle owners matching the tire impressions were contacted, traffic records and GPS data from local systems were examined. Officers conducted additional interviews, re-examined the roadway, and expanded the search to adjoining highways and paths. Every possible avenue was pursued with urgency, knowing that the first days after a disappearance were critical for recovery and resolution as the investigation unfolded. Detectives also considered alternative scenarios, while evidence initially suggested an accidental vehicular collision. Investigators did not discount the possibility of foul play or an unintentional act by a third party. Each hypothesis was tested against the collected physical evidence, witness statements, and environmental conditions. Analytical teams reconstructed potential trajectories, evaluating how a collision might have occurred, the impact of vehicle speed, and how personal belongings could have been displaced amidst this rigorous process. The human dimension of the case remained central. Melody's absence had profound emotional implications for her family, friends, and the local community. Officers, while focused on procedural rigor, also provided support to Richard, helping him navigate the uncertainty and stress of the early investigative stages. His insight into Melody's habits, personality, and health became invaluable for shaping search strategies and prioritizing investigative efforts as the days progressed. The investigation evolved into a multifaceted operation combining forensic science, witness interviews, environmental analysis, and community engagement. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, each measurement contributed to a broader understanding of the incident by methodically piecing together the physical, environmental, and human factors. Investigators gradually began to construct a coherent narrative of the morning of September 20th, aiming to uncover what had truly happened to Melody Roras. The investigation progressed into its second week. Detectives began to notice patterns in the evidence that had initially seemed disjointed. The tire tracks near Highway 84 suggested a vehicle traveling at moderate speed, and the spacing between the tread marks indicated careful maneuvering, almost as if the driver had been aware of an obstacle on the road but failed to see it in time. Forensic specialists examined the soil embedded in the tire grooves, confirming it matched the roadside composition where Melody's belongings were discovered. This strongly suggested that the vehicle responsible had been on the scene and likely left quickly after the incident. Detectives focused on reconstructing the scene in detail, using photogrammetry and measurements taken on site. They created a 3D model of the roadside embankment, and the location of Melody's jacket, shoe, and cap. They simulated various scenarios, whether she had been struck while stepping off the pavement, if she had tripped near the embankment, or if a vehicle had swerved to avoid her. The reconstructions helped narrow down the likely trajectory and impact points, which in turn guided forensic teams on where to search for vehicle debris or paint traces. Meanwhile, community outreach became critical. Authorities issued a detailed public advisory, asking for any dashcam footage, cell phone videos, or eyewitness accounts from the morning of September 20th. Local businesses, RV park residents, and passersby were encouraged to check their security systems for any unusual activity within a few days. This effort began to bear fruit. A private security camera from a small shop located near the Highway 84 bend had captured a faint, blurry image of a dark-colored sedan passing at approximately 8:40 a.m. The angle was poor, but it provided a crucial lead detector. Detectives traced the sedan's license plate through the regional DMV database. The owner was identified as a middle-aged man with a clean driving record, living in a neighboring county. Interviews with neighbors revealed little about the man's daily routine, but several reported seeing him drive frequently on Highway 84 during the mornings. Though none suspected anything unusual, The investigation team obtained a warrant to search the vehicle and its owner's property. Forensic analysts were brought in to examine the car, focusing on the front bumper, wheel arches, and undercarriage for traces of soil, paint chips, or fibers consistent with evidence found at the scene. The forensic analysis yielded a breakthrough. Tiny paint fragments found on the front bumper matched the yellow jacket Melody had been wearing. Soil residues on the tires corresponded precisely to the roadside composition where her belongings were discovered. These findings strongly suggested that the vehicle had indeed struck Melody or made contact with her belongings during the incident. Combined with witness statements, tire track analysis, and the camera footage, authorities had sufficient evidence to confront the vehicle owner when questioned. The suspect initially claimed innocence, asserting he had been driving early that morning but had not seen anyone near the roadway. Detectives pressed further, presenting the forensic evidence and the 3D scene reconstruction under careful interrogation. Inconsistencies in his statements began to emerge. Witness accounts placed a person in the vicinity at the exact time of the incident, matching Melody's description gradually. The suspect admitted to having swerved to avoid what he thought was a small animal on the road he described, seeing a figure in yellow. Melody stepped into his path unexpectedly, though. He claimed he tried to stop. The sudden appearance and slick road conditions led to the tragic outcome. Authorities reconstructed the sequence of events with chilling clarity. Melody had likely stepped slightly off the pavement while observing the as she often did, to keep an eye on approaching vehicles. The driver, distracted or misjudging distance, attempted to avoid her, but struck her belongings, while Melody herself may have avoided a direct collision. The force displaced her items and caused her to fall into the roadside embankment, resulting in severe injuries. The accidental nature of the incident explained why it initially seemed she had vanished without trace. Once the suspect's confession was corroborated with physical evidence and witness statements, investigators shifted focus to recovery efforts. Search parties returned to the roadside embankment, employing ground-penetrating radar, drones, and canine units trained in human scent detection. After several tense hours, a faint scent trail led officers to a hidden depression near a cluster of brush, where Melody's body was found, though she had succumbed to injuries sustained during the fall. The recovery brought a sense of closure to the investigation, allowing law enforcement to piece together the tragic sequence of events in the aftermath. The case drew significant public attention. Local media covered every detail, emphasizing the diligence and persistence of law enforcement, the role of forensic science, and the tragic accident that had led to Melody's disappearance. Richard, while devastated, expressed deep gratitude to the officers and investigators who had worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. Community members held memorials, remembering Melody as a vibrant, caring individual who had devoted her life to helping others and had embraced her retirement with curiosity and joy. The investigation also prompted discussions about road safety in rural areas. Highway 84, with its blind curves, minimal signage, and pedestrian use, became a focal point for local government and transportation agencies. Safety measures, including better signage, road widening, and pedestrian awareness campaigns, were implemented to prevent similar accidents in the future. Church continued to honor Melody's memory, reflecting on the decades they had shared, and the final chapter that had been unexpectedly cut short. He documented their travels, shared stories of their adventures, and advocated for safer walking paths and awareness campaigns to protect elderly pedestrians and travelers. Melody's story, while tragic, served as a reminder of the fragility of life, the importance of vigilance on the road, and the enduring impact one person can have on a community, even after passing. In the end, the case of Melody Rohr demonstrated the meticulous nature of modern investigative work, the careful collection and analysis of evidence, the integration of witness accounts, forensic science, and technological tools to reconstruct events, and the tireless efforts of law enforcement, personnel dedicated to uncovering the truth. It also highlighted the human dimension of investigations, the emotional toll on families, the empathy and professionalism required of officers, and the profound societal responsibility to ensure that accidents are fully understood and lessons learned to prevent future tragedies. Melody's story, from the peaceful walks along Lake Niles to the harrowing sequence of events on Highway 84, remains a somber reminder of life's unpredictability. Yet, her memory endures not only in the hearts of her loved ones, but also in the lessons learned by the community, the safety measures implemented, and the dedication of those who refused to let her disappearance remain a mystery. Though she never returned from that morning walk, the clarity brought by the investigation ensured that her story would be remembered, honored, and serve as a testament to perseverance, justice, and the enduring human desire to protect and understand those we love. In the weeks following the resolution, the Oak Shores community came together to commemorate Melody's life. Local newspapers ran stories, highlighting her decades of service as a nurse, her dedication to caring for patients, and her adventurous spirit in retirement. People in the RV park, who had known her only casually, spoke of her kindness, her cheerful greetings during morning walks, and her willingness to help neighbors at a moment's notice. Friends from other towns, whom she and Richard had visited during their travels, sent letters and messages of condolence. Melody's story touched not only those who knew her personally, but also strangers who were inspired by the narrative of a life lived fully and tragically. Cut short, the investigation itself became a case study in law enforcement training programs across the state. Police academies used it as an example of proper procedure in missing person cases, emphasizing the importance of rapid response, meticulous evidence collection, community outreach, and forensic reconstruction. Officers learned how critical even minor details such as tire tread patterns or a stray cap could be in piecing together an otherwise baffling incident. Detective Jason, Officer Everhard, and their colleagues were recognized formally for their dedication, highlighting how careful teamwork and attention to detail can resolve even the most perplexing disappearances. Roar, meanwhile, found solace in documenting his travels with Melody, publishing photographs and stories of their time together. Each entry became both a memorial and a celebration of their shared adventures, from sunsets over mountain lakes to quiet moments at roadside diners. By sharing their story, he hoped to inspire other retirees to embrace adventure while remaining mindful of the fragility of life. He also began advocating for pedestrian safety initiatives, working with local authorities to install better lighting and signage along frequently used walking paths and roads, aiming to prevent other families from enduring the same heartbreaks. The incident left a lasting impression on the RV park. Residents and visitors, people who had once taken for granted the peaceful morning walks, became acutely aware of the risks inherent in seemingly safe environments. Community workshops were organized to educate elderly residents and travelers about personal safety, situational awareness, and emergency preparedness. Melody's disappearance and the thorough investigation that followed had created a ripple effect of increased vigilance and care throughout the region. As time passed, the Roar's story reached a wider audience through national media, drawing attention to the importance of rapid reporting, coordinated investigation, and the power of community cooperation in missing person cases. True crime podcasts, local news segments, and investigative journals recounted the events, focusing on the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the meticulous forensic work that ultimately uncovered the truth. Analysts highlighted how modern investigative techniques, combined with traditional detective work, bridged the gap between speculation and certainty. For Richard, life continued with an added sense of purpose, though the loss of Melody remained a profound personal tragedy. He channeled his grief into action supporting pedestrian safety campaigns, volunteering at local hospitals in her memory, and mentoring younger retirees about the importance of pursuing their passions while remaining alert to safety concerns. His love for Melody endured, not just in memory, but in the concrete actions he took to honor her life and protect others. The case also prompted state authorities to reevaluate rural roadway safety standards. Highway 84, where Melody had been found, underwent significant improvements. Reflective markers were installed, curves were widened for better visibility, and designated pedestrian walkways were created to ensure that future walkers could enjoy the scenic route without facing undue risk. Local governments collaborated with community organizations to create safer recreational areas for seniors and travelers, emphasizing both physical safety and accessibility. In the broader scope, Melody's story became more than a tragic accident. It became a lesson in resilience, community, and the importance of vigilance. It showed how a single, unforeseen event could ripple through a community, transforming attitudes, inspiring action, and ultimately saving lives. The narrative of her morning walk on September 20th, 2021, remained etched into local history, a reminder of both the fragility of life and the enduring human spirit that emerges in response to tragedy. Ultimately, Melody's legacy was preserved not only through the resolution of the Bates investigation, but also through the ongoing initiatives inspired by her life and untimely death. Every safety measure implemented, every awareness campaign initiated, and every story shared in her memory became part of a collective effort to honor her spirit. Though she never returned from that morning walk, the clarity brought by diligent investigation and the lessons learned ensured that her story continued to impact lives, guiding communities toward safety, compassion, and vigilance. Her story became a symbol, a reminder that even the smallest actions, like reporting a missing person promptly or meticulously analyzing tire tracks and personal belongings, can make the difference between despair and closure in the hearts of those who knew her. In the policies inspired by her case, and in the memory of her adventurous spirit, Melody Rohr's life endured, forever intertwined with the lessons she left behind. Merged from the digital evidence collected from Melody's devices, investigators examined her smartphone and discovered the GPS tracking history recorded by the Location Services app. The data revealed that Melody had indeed started her usual morning walk around 8:17 a.m., heading west along Highway 84. The GPS signal tracked her path until approximately 10:52 a.m., where it abruptly stopped near the site of the accident. This confirmed that she had been struck somewhere along the roadside, and the sudden disappearance of the signal suggested that either the phone had been turned off or physically removed from her possession. Then requested traffic camera footage from nearby intersections and highway monitoring systems. Although the area was mostly rural, a camera positioned at a small junction north of Highway 84 captured partial footage showing a vehicle matching the description of a Ford pickup truck traveling at high speed in the east-west direction. Shortly before 11 a.m., the vehicle appeared to swerve sharply just before the camera's view ended, consistent with the tire marks observed at the scene. While the footage did not capture the collision directly, it corroborated the physical evidence on the roadside and supported the theory that the driver had intentionally or accidentally struck Melody and then removed her from the scene. Forensic analysts also examined the tire tracks and determined the type of tires used. They matched the tread pattern to a specific model commonly found on Ford F-150 pickups manufactured between 2017 and 2021. The spacing and depth of the tracks suggested that the vehicle was heavily loaded, which might explain why the impact lifted Melody off the ground and carried her into the truck bed, consistent with the K9 unit's findings that she had been moved from the immediate accident location. Investigators quickly expanded the search to registered owners of vehicles matching the tire and make information within a 20-mile radius of Oak Shores Park using DMV records and cross-referencing with recent traffic violations. They narrowed the list to about 12 potential suspects. Detectives then conducted interviews with each, focusing on their whereabouts. On the morning of September 20th, several claimed to be at work or out of town, but one name repeatedly drew attention due to inconsistent statements: a local farmhand named Stephen Caldwell, who lived roughly 5 miles north of the accident site and owned a Ford pickup registered in his name. When questioned, Caldwell initially denied any involvement. However, forensic examination of his vehicle revealed fresh damage to the front grille and traces of yellow fibers, consistent with Melody's rain jacket. Blood was also discovered inside the truck bed, further linking the vehicle to the accident. Caldwell eventually confessed that he had been speeding to deliver supplies and, upon realizing he had struck Melody, panicked in a state of shock. He placed her in the truck and drove away, intending to find help but ultimately abandoning her along a remote dirt trail, where she had succumbed to her injuries. The case concluded with Caldwell being charged with vehicular manslaughter, reckless endangerment, and failure to render aid during the trial. Evidence from the roadside, the canine units, drone footage, GPS tracking, and forensic analysis were all presented, painting a comprehensive picture of the events leading to Melody's death. The court noted the meticulous investigation and the combination of modern forensic techniques with traditional detective work, which ultimately brought justice to the victim and closure to her grieving husband. Rower, though devastated, expressed gratitude to the police department for their persistence and professionalism. He emphasized that while nothing could bring back Melody, the investigation and resulting legal action offered a sense of justice and allowed him to honor her memory in the aftermath. State authorities improved safety measures along Highway 84, including the installation of pedestrian warning signs, reflective road markers, and designated walking paths to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Melody Roar's story serves as both a cautionary tale and a tribute. It highlights the vulnerabilities of pedestrians on rural highways, the significance of rapid emergency response, and the vital role of forensic and investigative precision in resolving complex cases. Her life, characterized by service, adventure, and love for family, continues to inspire communities to advocate for safety, vigilance, and compassion. Detectives, satisfied that Caldwell's confession and forensic evidence aligned with the physical scene, ensured the crime was documented in painstaking detail. Each step, from Melody's morning routine to the discovery of tire tracks and fragments, was meticulously recorded to avoid any ambiguity. In court, investigators also interviewed first responders, including officers Jason Delwist and Ever, to understand their decision-making processes during the initial hours. Their coordinated approach, splitting search areas, securing evidence, and deploying K9 units and drones, demonstrated a model response for rural accident investigations. While Melody's story ended tragically, it also illuminated the resilience and precision of modern investigative methods, contrasting sharply with older cases where victims were often overlooked. For example, comparing this case to the Daisuke Maruyama murder trial, one could see the evolution of law enforcement, courtroom procedure, and evidence handling over decades. In Daisuke's trial, the heavy reliance on witness testimony, lay judge deliberation, and circumstantial evidence highlighted the limitations of the judicial system when technology and forensics were less advanced. Ms. Sato's testimony revealed the psychological complexity of human relationships and how public perception can be manipulated until the full truth is exposed in court. The ninth imprisonment of Daisuke, followed by an appeal, underscores the intricate balancing act between justice, public opinion, and legal procedure. Shiruri Saga, in turn, demonstrated the extremes of human endurance and ingenuity. Unlike Melody's passive vulnerability or Daisuke's legal entanglement, Shiruri actively challenged his environment through repeated prison escapes, manipulation of his physical and mental skills, and eventual advocacy for justice. Shiruri became a symbol of both the flaws and potential for reform in Japan's justice system. While Melody's case relied on meticulous evidence, gathering and technological tools. Shiruri's victories were won through intellect, patience, and resilience under brutal conditions. The Abashiri prison model and his exploits remind investigators, legislators, and the public that systems designed to enforce order can also become instruments of cruelty, unless continuously reformed. In all three cases, one theme emerges clearly: human resilience. Whether in the pursuit of justice, survival, or truth, Dasuki's victims and family suffered under deception. Shiruri endured unimaginable hardship to reclaim his dignity. Melody fell victim to chance and negligence on the road. Each narrative emphasizes a different angle of human vulnerability. Systemic and situational bet also underscores the response mechanisms that society builds to protect and correct. The combination of law, human intuition, forensic science, and sheer willpower creates a framework where justice and moral accountability can, eventually, prevail. Moreover, these stories show the interplay between trust and betrayal. Dasuki's constituents and lover were betrayed by his dual nature. Shiruri learned the dangers of misplaced trust with Kobayashi, and Melody's tragedy revealed the unpredictability of human behavior, where a driver's panic led to catastrophic consequences. Yet in each case, elements of trust. The jury in Dasuki's trial, the compassionate officer in Shiruri's saga, and the coordinated police work in Melody's disappearance were pivotal in steering events toward resolution. However, delayed or bittersweet, the narrative arc of these three stories also illustrates the evolution of justice systems from the lay judge trial in Nagano to modern forensic procedures on Highway 84, and finally to post-war reform of Japan's prisons. The trajectory of human society is clear. Errors, cruelty, and tragedy are inevitable, but resilience, ingenuity, and compassion offer a path forward future generations can study. These cases not only for their sensational details, but also for the lessons embedded within lessons of fairness, diligence, human rights, and the need to balance authority with empathy for readers. This collection of events, from political betrayal and judicial scrutiny to heroic endurance against systemic cruelty, to the tragic but thoroughly investigated death of an innocent retiree, paints a panoramic view of the human experience under extreme circumstances. Justice is never instantaneous. Survival often requires more than strength alone. Truth is sometimes hidden beneath layers of fear, deception, or oversight, and yet, through persistent investigation, moral courage, and innovative thinking, clarity and justice are achievable, if not always perfect. In conclusion, the Daisuke and Roar cases collectively serve as testaments to the fragility and resilience of human life, the imperfections and reformable nature of institutional systems, and the enduring importance of diligence, empathy, and ingenuity in the pursuit of justice. Each story, while individually compelling, gains added depth when viewed together, forming a triad of caution, inspiration, and reflection, reminding society that behind every legal case, every prison wall, and every accident site, there are human lives, frailties, and strengths that shape the course of history. Monitored Colby's reactions closely, noting every micro-expression, hesitation, and shift in tone. Colby appeared nervous, frequently glancing around as if expecting someone to intervene after establishing a baseline of casual conversation. Walker gradually steered the discussion toward September 20th. Colby, Walker began, his voice calm but firm. Can you tell me where you were yesterday morning between 8 o'clock and 9:30 a.m.? Colby hesitated, swallowed hard, and fidgeted with his cuffs. I was at home, just resting. I didn't go anywhere, he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Walker's trained eyes caught the slight tremor in Colby's hands. He knew from experience that inconsistencies in a suspect's story often preceded confession or deception at home. Walker pressed. You realize your phone, which was active that day, was detected in a Samsung device near Highway 84, close to the scene where Melody Roar went missing. Colby's breathing grew shallow. He tried to respond, but no words came. Walker let the silence stretch, allowing the suspect's discomfort to build. Then, with surgical precision, Walker recounted the sequence of evidence: the tire tracks, the damaged Ford F-150, the Adidas cap, the yellow rain jacket. Each detail was delivered calmly, yet each strike was precise, leaving no room for escape. Colby slumped back in the seat, pale and defeated. I didn't mean to," he whispered, his voice barely audible. It was an accident." Walker leaned in. "Go on." Colby's confession unfolded slowly. He had been driving his Ford pickup that morning after drinking with friends, and while traveling along Highway 84, he swerved to avoid an animal and accidentally struck Melody. Panicked, he admitted he had loaded her into his vehicle and left the scene, fearing legal consequences: the stolen SIM card, the temporary deactivation of Melody's phone, and his choice to stop at remote areas to hide all fit into this narrative. Following the confession, officers recovered Melody's personal items from locations Colby had disclosed, confirming her belongings' presence and corroborating his account. Forensic analysis of his truck matched all debris, dents, and vehicle damage patterns with evidence collected at the roadside scenes. Subsequent investigations determined that, tragically, Melody did not survive the accident. Her body had been left in a secluded area, not far from where Colby's truck had stopped, emphasizing both the cruelty of chance and the consequences of human panic under extreme stress. The case proceeded swiftly during trial. The prosecution used Colby's confession, forensic evidence, and digital tracking data to construct an airtight case. The defense attempted to argue temporary insanity due to fear and intoxication, but the premeditated steps Colby took to avoid detection, removing the SIM card, altering his phone, moving the vehicle, demonstrated clear consciousness of guilt. Ultimately, Colby Martin was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and obstruction of justice, receiving a sentence that reflected both the tragic loss of Melody Rohr and the severity of his attempts to conceal the crime. This investigation highlighted several key advancements in modern law enforcement: the integration of digital forensics, wearable health devices like Fitbits, and a TNT location tracking played a pivotal role in piecing together the timeline. It also underscored the importance of cross-referencing traditional physical evidence, tire tracks, vehicle debris, and witness statements, with emerging technology. Melody Rohr's tragic death, though devastating, became a case study in 21st century investigative methodology. Her story, juxtaposed with historical cases like Shiruri's legendary escapes and Asuki's criminal trials, illustrated the evolution of criminal justice, from human endurance and intuition to systematic reform to sophisticated technological investigation. In all cases, whether through cunning and patience or meticulous police work and digital evidence, the pursuit of truth remained constant, testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the enduring quest for justice. After Colby Martin's arrest and confession, law enforcement began coordinating with the coroner and accident reconstruction experts. The focus shifted to understanding the exact circumstances that led to Melody Rohr's death. Experts determined that the combination of high speed, narrow shoulder, and sudden evasive maneuver caused the fatal collision. The evidence showed that, had it not been for Colby's panicked decision to move Melody and his attempt to conceal his involvement, the timeline might have allowed emergency services to reach her in time, potentially saving her life. Meanwhile, the community of Oak Shores Park in Lake Niles was shaken. Residents mourned Melody's passing, honoring her years of service as a nurse and her quiet, friendly presence in the neighborhood. Memorials were erected near her favorite walking route, and local news outlets highlighted the bravery and persistence of the police officers who pieced together the seemingly scattered clues: tire tracks, Fitbits, SIM cards, and fragments of a Ford truck. Detective Fright, though deeply affected by the tragic outcome, documented the case meticulously. The investigation became a reference point for how technology could aid in missing person cases, particularly through the integration of wearable devices and mobile tracking departments across the states studied. The methods and training protocols were updated to include lessons from Melody's cases for Colby Martin. His sentencing was not only a legal repercussion, but also a psychological reckoning in court. He expressed remorse, acknowledging that his decisions had caused irreversible harm. Psychologists involved in the case noted that while Colby had panic-fueled actions, he also had opportunities to call for help immediately after the accident. His failure to do so exacerbated the tragedy, cementing both legal and moral culpability. This case also highlighted a broader, societal conversation about the responsibilities of drivers, the role of technology in monitoring health and location, and the importance of rapid emergency response. Melody's Fitbit data, previously considered a personal health tool, became a critical piece of evidence demonstrating how emerging technologies could revolutionize investigative processes in the aftermath. Richard Rohr, though grieving, became an advocate for pedestrian safety and digital tools in missing person investigations. He shared Melody's story at conferences and community events, stressing how vigilance, technology, and community cooperation could save lives. Ultimately, the story of Melody Rohr, juxtaposed with the historical accounts of Shiruri's prison breaks, served as a study in human resilience, ingenuity, and tragedy. From Shiruri's meticulous planning and perseverance in the face of inhumane treatment to Melody's sudden, unexpected encounter with tragedy, the narratives together illustrate the unpredictable interplay between human agency and circumstance across decades and contexts. These stories converge on a central theme: the quest for survival, justice, and truth. Whether navigating the cruel confines of early 20th century prisons or unraveling a 21st century criminal investigation, the human spirit, resilient, observant, and unyielding, remains at the core. Even as technology evolves and societies change, the essential qualities that define these stories, cunning, courage, patience, and empathy, continue to resonate. Shiruri's ingenuity and Melody's perseverance may differ in context, but both highlight the enduring human desire to seek justice, protect loved ones, and navigate the precarious balance between life, risk, and morality. And, while history may record their deeds differently, one as legend, the other as cautionary tale, both leave indelible marks on the communities they touched, the justice systems they challenged, and the future generations who study their lives after the arrest and preliminary investigation. Colby Martin's case rapidly became the center of media attention. News outlets ran detailed reports about the tire tracks, the damaged Ford F-150, and the Fitbit data that ultimately led to his capture. The public was fascinated by the way technology, combined with traditional detective work, had uncovered the truth for many. It was a modern detective story that rivaled any crime novel. Detective Fright remained deeply involved in the case. He spent countless hours reviewing footage from nearby security cameras, interviewing local residents once more, and coordinating with forensic experts. Every detail mattered: the exact angle of the tire tracks, the placement of Melody's shoes and rain jacket, the trajectory of debris from the collision. The investigation was not just about solving a crime, it was about justice for Melody, a woman whose life had been abruptly ended in a rural stretch of highway. Colby Martin, meanwhile, was placed in a holding facility while awaiting trial and interviews with his attorneys. He admitted that he had panicked after hitting Melody. He confessed to moving her from the roadside and attempting to hide his involvement, but he continued to insist that the accident itself was unintentional. Despite his remorse, investigators were alarmed by the lack of immediate action to call emergency services, which had tragically sealed Melody's fate. As the case moved forward, forensic analysis became pivotal. Specialists reconstructed the vehicle's movement using the tire tracks, debris pattern, and estimated speed. They confirmed that Colby had been driving recklessly fast, likely distracted, and made a sharp swerve that led to the fatal collision. The team also examined the contents of the pickup truck and found evidence suggesting attempts to conceal items that could link him to the scene, including remnants of Melody's belongings. This compounded his legal jeopardy, transforming the case from a tragic accident into felony charges including vehicular homicide and obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, Richard Rohr struggled with the grief of losing his wife, yet he channeled his sorrow into action, working with local authorities and advocacy groups to promote pedestrian safety. He spoke publicly about the dangers of rural roads, the importance of driver vigilance, and the life-saving potential of wearable technology like Fitbits. His advocacy gained traction, leading to new awareness campaigns across Michigan, warning drivers to watch for pedestrians, especially in areas without sidewalks or emergency lanes. Detective Fright, reflecting on the investigation, emphasized the importance of combining modern technology with classic investigative techniques. The case had been cracked not by a single breakthrough, but by layering multiple sources of evidence: tire tracks, Fitbit data, SIM card tracking, forensic vehicle analysis, and eyewitness accounts. Each piece of information alone might not have been sufficient, but together they painted a complete picture. Colby Martin's trial commenced in late 2021, drawing both local and national attention. Prosecutors presented a meticulously documented case, highlighting the tire tracks, vehicle damage, the stolen SIM card, and the timeline derived from Fitbit data. They argued that while the accident itself may have been unintentional, Colby's decision to move Melody and attempt concealment constituted gross negligence and a failure to fulfill his moral and legal obligations. Defense attorneys, in contrast, argued that Colby's panic was understandable and that the initial collision had been unavoidable after weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and forensic demonstrations. The jury reached a verdict. Colby Martin was found guilty of vehicular homicide and obstruction of justice. The sentence reflected the gravity of his actions: a significant prison term combined with mandatory community service and participation in road safety campaigns. While the punishment could not restore Melody's life, it offered a measure of justice for her family and the community. Aftermath of the case also inspired further integration of technology in missing person and accident investigations. Law enforcement agencies across the country began equipping officers with devices capable of syncing with wearables, mobile phones, and cloud services, recognizing that even everyday devices like Fitbits could provide critical timelines and movement data. Melody's case became a benchmark in forensic circles, demonstrating the value of combining digital evidence with traditional investigative skills. Richard Rohr continued to honor his wife's memory through public speaking, educational campaigns, and community outreach. He remained a steadfast advocate for pedestrian safety, and his efforts contributed to increased local awareness and policy discussions on the design of rural roads and emergency infrastructure. While nothing could bring Melody back, Richard's actions helped ensure that others might avoid similar tragedies. From a broader perspective, Melody Rohr's story, while tragic, became emblematic of the intersection between human vulnerability, technological potential, and the tireless pursuit of justice. It demonstrated how meticulous police work, aided by technology, could uncover truths that might otherwise have remained hidden. The case also highlighted the ethical responsibility of individuals like Colby Martin to act with integrity in the severe consequences when panic and negligence override moral judgment. In the end, Melody's story, like Sharuri's decades earlier, left a lasting legacy. While Sharuri's life illustrated ingenuity, resilience, and the quest for justice in the face of oppressive forces, Melody's life and death underscored the fragility of existence, the importance of vigilance, and the power of modern investigative tools to reveal truth. Both stories, though separated by time and circumstance, remind us of the profound impact one individual's actions, whether heroic or tragic, can have on society, the legal system, and collective memory. He avoided eye contact, fidgeted with his hands, and gave inconsistent answers about the timeline. Detectives pressed further, noting that the SIM card's activity indicated deliberate use. Shortly after the incident, Colby first claimed he had found the SIM card in the road, then changed his story, saying he might have accidentally picked it up, and later suggested he may have been trying to keep it safe. Each version contradicted the last, raising suspicions that he was attempting to manipulate the digital evidence. Detective Fright and his team cross-referenced the SIM card activity with the vehicle evidence. They noted that the times from the SIM card's activation matched the period immediately after the accident, directly placing Colby at the scene and confirming that he had control of Melody's personal items. Furthermore, forensic analysis of his truck revealed traces of grass, soil, and fibers consistent with Melody's clothing and footwear, which he had attempted to remove or clean. The blanket he claimed to have used to cover her was never found, but fibers collected from the truck bed suggested he had indeed attempted to conceal her body. As the interrogation progressed, detectives used behavioral analysis techniques to apply subtle psychological pressure. They emphasized the inevitability of truth emerging through technology, forensic evidence, and witness accounts. They repeatedly reminded Colby of the Fitbit timeline, the tire tracks, and the vehicle damage over time. Cracks appeared in his story. He began to admit, in fragments, that he had panicked after the collision, had moved Melody, and had tried to obscure the evidence, but still hesitated to reveal full details about his actions. Afterward, detectives also focused on inconsistencies in Colby's recollection of the day before and the accident day. They compared his statements with statements from family members, neighbors, and his ex-wife, Kelly Howland. Each comparison highlighted discrepancies, particularly regarding his reported Deer accident, his whereabouts during the hours after the collision, and his access to the Samsung phone containing Melody's SIM card. Finally, Detective David Walker shifted tactics, speaking directly about the consequences for Melody's family. By humanizing the victim and connecting the abstract evidence to a real person, he observed a noticeable change in Colby's demeanor. Colby's posture slumped, his voice wavered, and he occasionally whispered partial confessions. These emotional cues helped the detectives piece together a detailed timeline of events. Colby hit Melody around 8:45 a.m., panicked, placed her body in the truck bed, drove to a secluded area near Purgatory State Park, and attempted to cover the crime with staged evidence, all while using her SIM card to obscure the digital trail through persistent questioning and forensic evidence. Detectives ultimately secured a full confession. Colby admitted the critical details, his actions after the accident, the placement of Melody's body, and attempts to manipulate digital evidence to avoid detection. This confession, combined with physical and electronic evidence, allowed the prosecution to build an airtight case, proving beyond doubt that Colby Martin's actions directly led to Melody Roar's death and the subsequent concealment of her body. The case then moved forward to trial, where forensic experts, law enforcement officers, and digital analysts presented a comprehensive reconstruction of the incident. Tire tracks, vehicle damage, Fitbit data, SIM card activity, and Colby's confession were all presented to the jury, establishing both causation and deliberate attempts to conceal the crime. The trial of Colby Martin began in early 2022, drawing national attention due to the combination of technology, forensic evidence, and the tragic circumstances surrounding Melody Roar's death. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and family members, including Richard Roar, who had never wavered in seeking justice for his wife. The atmosphere was tense, heavy with grief, and the public's expectation for accountability. The prosecution opened by detailing the sequence of events, using a visual timeline that incorporated the Fitbit data, vehicle evidence, tire tracks, In Colby's own statements, the judge allowed these digital and forensic exhibits, emphasizing the reliability of modern technology in reconstructing crimes. Investigators testified about the tire impressions at the scene, showing how the direction and depth indicated that the vehicle had swerved deliberately rather than simply losing control. Photographs of the truck's damaged grille and hood were displayed, highlighting the severity of impact consistent with a collision with a human rather than a The prosecution introduced the digital evidence. Detective Fright demonstrated the Fitbit data on a large screen, marking the exact timestamps when Melody's activity stopped and briefly resumed, aligning perfectly with Colby's confessions. Then came the SIM card evidence. The forensic expert explained how the card had been transferred to Colby's Samsung device within hours of the incident, showing deliberate interference with Melody's devices. The court could see the digital footprint of a man trying to manipulate the investigation, making it nearly impossible for Colby to deny the fact. Colby's defense attorney argued that the accident was unintentional, that Colby panicked, and that he did not intend to harm Melody. They suggested that moving the body and using her SIM card were acts of confusion and fear rather than malicious intent. They attempted to paint him as a flawed but fundamentally remorseful man, hoping to mitigate the sentence. However, the prosecution countered by emphasizing the premeditated nature of the concealment, the deliberate placement of the body, tampering with evidence, and the false deer story all pointed to calculated decisions made in the aftermath, not mere panic. During witness testimonies, Richard Rohr gave a powerful and emotional account of his life with Melody, highlighting her disciplined habits, love for walking, and meticulous routine. He explained how she would never leave voluntarily, and how her death had left a void in the community. Melody's friends and neighbors spoke of her cheerful personality, generosity, and how the local community had been deeply affected by her disappearance. These testimonies made the crime personal for the jury, reminding them that this was not an abstract event, but the life-ending result of Colby's actions. Law enforcement officers testified about the investigation, including the discovery of the tire tracks, clothing, and the timeline reconstruction using technology. They explained how careful coordination, digital evidence, and old-fashioned detective work led to pinpointing Colby as the primary suspect. The jury saw a clear pattern of avoidance, manipulation, and consciousness of guilt after several weeks of testimony, expert analysis, and closing arguments. The jury deliberated for 3 days. During deliberation, the combination of digital footprints, forensic evidence, and eyewitness accounts proved decisive. They concluded that while the collision may have initially been accidental, Colby's actions afterward, moving the body, attempting to hide evidence, and misleading authorities constituted felony murder and obstruction of justice. The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all charges. The judge, taking into account Colby's deliberate concealment and the gravity of Melody's death, sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Additionally, Colby was ordered to pay restitution to the Rohr family for emotional damages, funeral costs, and therapy for Richard and other family members who had suffered severe trauma. Aftermath of the trial resonated beyond the courtroom. Law enforcement agencies highlighted the importance of digital evidence in solving modern crimes, emphasizing how Fitbit data, SIM card tracking, and GPS could piece together timelines in ways previously impossible. Public discourse focused on the responsibilities of drivers, the dangers of roadways, and the need for communities to watch for vulnerable individuals. Meanwhile, the Rohr family found some measure of closure, knowing that justice had been served, though the grief of losing Melody would never fully disappear. Melody Rohr, as story became a case study in law enforcement circles for years to come, illustrating the fusion of traditional detective work with digital forensics. Her life, love, and tragic end reminded communities of the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance. Colby Martin remained incarcerated, a stark reminder that attempts to conceal wrongdoing can never fully erase the truth. In the years following the trial, The impact of Melody Roar's death rippled through both her local community and the wider law enforcement world. Richard Roar, though devastated by the loss of his wife, chose to honor her memory by advocating for pedestrian safety and community awareness. He began volunteering with local organizations to educate residents about walking safety, the importance of reflective clothing, and the dangers of distracted driving. His talks often included Melody's story not as a morbid recounting, but as a cautionary tale to prevent others from suffering similar RV Park, where Melody and Richard had spent their retirement, became a subtle pilgrimage site for those who knew the couple or had heard of their story. Staff and visitors installed a small memorial near the walking trails, a simple stone marker with Melody's name and the dates of her life. The area remained peaceful, often adorned with fresh flowers, and it became a quiet reminder of the fragility of life and the permanence of loss. The case also left a profound mark on law enforcement practices in the region. Detective Fright, who had led the investigation, published a comprehensive report on the case, highlighting how the integration of wearable technology, SIM card tracking, and traditional forensic methods allowed authorities to reconstruct the sequence of events with unparalleled precision. Police departments across the state began implementing training programs to better utilize digital evidence, recognizing how devices like Fitbits, smartwatches, and mobile phones could provide critical timelines in missing person cases or suspected accidents in the courtroom. The verdict against Colby Martin became a reference case in legal circles. Lawyers cited it in discussions of felony murder, especially when considering cases involving post-incident actions intended to conceal crimes. The careful coordination between local police, AT&T, forensic specialists, and investigative officers demonstrated how modern crimes required both meticulous fieldwork and technological expertise. Law students studied the case to understand how seemingly small clues like Fitbit step data could become pivotal in securing justice. For Richard personally, the loss remained a daily reality, but he gradually found ways to weave Melody's memory into his life. Rather than let grief define him, he continued traveling, sometimes visiting places the couple had planned to see together. He started writing journals and memoir-style letters about their life, sharing anecdotes of Melody's generosity, humor, and unwavering kindness. These writings were eventually compiled into a small book, serving as both personal catharsis and a tribute to a life cut tragically short. Though Colby Martin remained incarcerated, the broader societal lessons of the case persisted. Local communities became more vigilant. Law enforcement refined their investigative strategies, and the integration of technology into crime solving gained acceptance as a necessary tool rather than an optional addition. Melody's story, tragic though it was, helped catalyze these changes, turning a heartbreaking incident into a lasting legacy of awareness, justice, and improved safety protocols. In the end, the story of Melody Roar was not only about loss, but also about resilience, vigilance, and the tireless pursuit of truth. Her life inspired action, her death prompted change, and her memory remained a guiding light for all those who sought justice. In the modern age, building on the three stories, a broader pattern emerges, one that links them through resilience, human ingenuity, and the pursuit of justice. Each narrative, Shiruri's daring prison escapes, Melody Roar's tragic end, and the societal impact that followed, illuminates different facets of the human experience, from defiance against oppressive systems to the fragility of life and the tenacity of those left behind. Shiruri's story, though historical, stands as a testament to human willpower. His repeated escapes weren't mere acts of defiance. They were strategic demonstrations of intellect and endurance. Each prison posed a new challenge, from Akita's high windows to Abashiri's frozen isolation. Shiruri adapted with ingenuity, patience, and an uncanny understanding of both human behavior and mechanical vulnerabilities. Even in solitude, his mind never ceased to work, turning the most hopeless situations into opportunities for liberation beyond personal freedom. His story sparked discussions on human rights, prison reform, and the ethical obligations of those in positions of power. His legacy continues to resonate in Japan's legal and cultural consciousness, immortalized in literature, film, and museum exhibitions. Melody Roar's story, by contrast, underscores life's unpredictability and the interconnectedness of technology, society, and justice. Her tragic accident was more than an isolated event. It became a catalyst for change. The meticulous investigation revealed the importance of digital evidence, wearable technology, and forensic reconstruction in modern law enforcement. Her death prompted improvements in pedestrian safety awareness, encouraged the integration of tech-based investigation methods, and inspired communities to reflect on personal responsibility and vigilance, even in tragedy. Melody's life and death led to actionable lessons that continue to protect others and honor her memory. Together, the stories demonstrate a continuum. Shiruri's resilience against unjust systems and Melody's story of unforeseen tragedy both highlight how individual actions ripple into broader social and legal frameworks. Shiruri fought to assert his human dignity in the face of an oppressive prison system, while Melody's death exposed vulnerabilities in public safety and investigative practices, ultimately reinforcing societal accountability. Both tales revealed the profound consequences that singular events can have, not just on those directly involved, but on institutions, communities, and cultural memory. These narratives also converge in their exploration of human psychology under extreme conditions. Shiruri's patience, deception, and strategic foresight showcase how necessity sharpens intellect and cultivates survival instincts. Melody's final hours, meticulously reconstructed through Fitbit data, tire marks, and forensic evidence, reflect the human vulnerability to random chance and the unforeseen consequences of a single split-second event. Both stories, though vastly different in tone and circumstance, underline a central truth: human ingenuity, endurance, and morality are continuously tested, whether against a system designed to suppress freedom or the unpredictable chaos of daily life. Finally, the societal aftermath of these stories reinforces the importance of lessons learned. Shiruri's escapes prompted prison reform and inspired cultural works, ensuring that his defiance had lasting significance beyond personal survival. Melody Roar's death, meanwhile, led to systemic improvements in investigation, public awareness campaigns, and legal precedents. In both cases, individuals' experiences acted as catalysts for institutional and communal evolution, whether through cunning and courage or through tragic consequence and societal response. These stories affirm the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring quest for justice, understanding, and reform. They remind us that individual experiences, whether heroic, tragic, or mundane, can reverberate far beyond their immediate context, shaping law, culture, and collective memory for generations to come. The bed of the truck swabs taken from the interior revealed traces of her hair, skin cells, and other biological matter. The DNA confirmed that she had been handled extensively inside the vehicle after the initial impact, corroborating the suspicions that this was far from an accidental collision. Tire tread analysis also revealed abnormal marks, consistent with swerving deliberately to hit a person rather than an evasive maneuver. Investigators then cross-checked Colby's statements with environmental evidence. Surveillance cameras in the area showed his truck traveling unusually slow in the moments leading up to the incident, suggesting he was aware of a target ahead. Witnesses near the location confirmed that no other vehicles had been in the vicinity, ruling out obstruction or sudden avoidance as a factor. The combination of witness testimony, tire and vehicle damage analysis, DNA, and digital tracking painted a chilling picture. This was a premeditated act that turned fatal, followed by a systematic attempt to conceal every trace. The police team now confident in the gravity of the situation, confronted Colby with the totality of evidence. They presented the findings from the car wash, the discarded clothing, the DNA evidence from the condom, and the forensic reconstruction of the vehicle trajectory. Initially, Colby became defensive and tried to deflect blame, claiming confusion and accident, but under persistent questioning, his statements fractured further. He admitted to some of the cleaning efforts, but denied the sexual assault, even as evidence directly contradicted him. To solidify the case, detectives coordinated with forensic psychologists to assess Colby's behavior. His evasive answers, repeated lies, and deliberate attempts to destroy evidence indicated a highly manipulative personality. The sequence of events showed methodical planning after the accident, moving the body, hiding incriminating items, cleaning the vehicle, and altering the narrative. To make the event appear accidental, each step revealed a calculated attempt to obstruct justice and evade responsibility. Investigators also reconstructed the timeline using the Fitbit data, phone records, and Colby's movements. Melody's steps stopped abruptly at 8:45 a.m., and the first evidence of her movement inside Colby's vehicle occurred shortly thereafter. The SIM card activity and the placement of devices confirmed that Colby had moved her and attempted to control digital evidence, providing a precise chronological map of his crime. Ultimately, the collected evidence, combined with the contradictory statements and psychological assessment, allowed law enforcement to categorize this case as a deliberate homicide with post-mortem concealment, rather than a simple traffic accident. Prosecutors charged Colby Martin with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and sexual assault. The careful investigative work ensured that every piece of physical, digital, and testimonial evidence would stand up in court, leaving little room for doubt about his culpability. The case became a landmark example of modern forensic investigation, highlighting the interplay between technology, witness testimony, and meticulous fieldwork. It underscored the importance of wearable devices like Fitbit, smartphone tracking, and surveillance in reconstructing events accurately. Moreover, it served as a grim reminder of how seemingly ordinary days can end in tragedy, and how justice relies on thorough, patient, and systematic investigative work to uncover the truth. Following the charges, Colby Martin was formally arraigned in the county courthouse. The courtroom was packed with press, family members, and law enforcement officials, all eager to witness the proceedings of a case that had captured national attention. Melody Rohr's family sat in the front row, their grief raw, but their presence unwavering, a testament to their determination to see justice done. The prosecution laid out the case in meticulous detail. Detective Freitara presented the chain of events, beginning with the initial disappearance, the roadside evidence, and the tire tracks that pointed directly to Colby's truck. He then detailed the technological trail, the Fitbit data proving Melody's last movements, the SIM card transfer to Colby's Samsung phone, and the digital evidence establishing that Colby had possession of her devices. Every piece of physical evidence was presented, including Melody's torn clothing, the blood-stained towels found in the car wash trash, and the forensic analysis of the Ford F-150 showing traces of her DNA throughout the vehicle. The prosecution emphasized the pattern of deception and deliberate concealment, Colby's repeated lies during interrogation, his attempt to destroy evidence, and the discrepancies between his statements and forensic findings painted a clear picture of a man attempting to cover up a violent act. Expert witnesses explained the mechanics of the accident reconstruction, showing that the trajectory of the truck and the placement of the debris left no room for an accidental collision. Colby's defense team attempted to argue that the incident was a tragic accident. They claimed that fog, poor visibility, and sudden obstacles caused the vehicle to swerve, resulting in Melody being struck. They sought to minimize Colby's culpability by portraying him as panicked and confused, and emphasized his initial cooperation in directing police to the body. They also brought in character witnesses, including family and colleagues, to argue that Colby had no history of violent behavior. However, the prosecution countered each claim. Systematically witness testimony, particularly from Jack, directly contradicted the defense's weather argument. The conditions were clear, the roads dry, and Melody was walking responsibly. Video footage and GPS tracking further undermined Colby's narrative, showing deliberate maneuvers inconsistent with accidental contact. The forensic pathologist described the severity of Melody's injuries, noting that multiple impacts and the removal of clothing were inconsistent with accidental harm and indicated deliberate post-mortem handling. As the trial progressed, the emotional weight in the courtroom grew. Richard Rohr recounted the morning of September 20th, describing his wife's routine, her fitness habits, and her loving nature. His testimony humanized Melody for the jury, painting a picture of a woman whose life was violently cut short. Melody's steps, her diligence, and her alertness contradicted any notion that she had suddenly appeared in Colby's path, further emphasizing the intentionality of the act. During the cross-examination, Colby struggled. He was confronted with the inconsistencies in his statements, the evidence from his car, the items found in the trash, and the DNA results. Each point chipped away at his defense, forcing him into defensive, sometimes contradictory answers. He attempted to justify cleaning the truck and disposing of items, claiming he was trying to hide evidence of an accident, but the sheer volume of incriminating evidence made these claims implausibly. Spurred testimony from a forensic psychologist analyzed Colby's behavior, highlighting patterns of manipulation, evasion, and premeditation. The expert explained that Colby's actions after the incident, covering up, removing clothing, and relocating the body, demonstrated consciousness of guilt and intent to avoid detection, reinforcing the prosecution's narrative of deliberate homicide. After several weeks, the jury retired to deliberate. The evidence had been exhaustive. Digital records, physical evidence, witness testimony, and expert analysis. The arguments had made clear that this was not merely a tragic accident, but a premeditated and intentional act, followed by systematic attempts to cover up the crime. Finally, after 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Colby Martin was found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, sexual assault, and evidence tampering. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and solemnity. Melody's family broke down in tears, finally feeling that justice had been achieved. The judge, acknowledging the severity of the crime and the premeditated nature of Colby's actions, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never harm another person again. The case of Melody Rohr became a landmark example in criminal law courses and forensic studies, demonstrating how modern investigative techniques, including wearable technology, digital tracking, and meticulous physical evidence analysis, could unravel even the most carefully concealed crimes. The investigation also highlighted the importance of patience, persistence, and the integration of multiple investigative methods to reconstruct events accurately and ensure justice. Melody's story, while tragic, inspired reforms in missing persons investigations, emphasizing the role of technology and the necessity of rapid, coordinated response. Her legacy lived on, not only through legal precedents, but also in the awareness raised for community safety, victim protection, and the enduring power of thorough investigative work. After his conviction, Colby Martin immediately filed an appeal, claiming procedural errors during the investigation and trial. His legal team argued that the admission of digital evidence, including Fitbit data and phone records, violated privacy norms, and that the jury had been influenced by media coverage, potentially biasing their judgment. The appellate court agreed to review the case, but emphasized that appeals based solely on technicalities rarely succeed when the factual evidence of guilt is overwhelming. During the appeal hearings, prosecutors meticulously defended the trial's integrity. They presented a timeline of the investigation, demonstrating that all evidence had been collected legally, and explained how digital footprints and forensic analysis were crucial in reconstructing the crime. Witnesses from the original trial were recalled to provide clarifications. Importantly, the forensic team reinforced that the combination of physical and digital evidence could not be dismissed as unreliable or circumstantial. The appellate judges took special interest in the Fitbit and iPhone evidence. They examined how wearable devices could track real-time physical activity and movement, and how discrepancies in the data directly contradicted Colby's claims of an accidental collision. After careful deliberation, the appeals court upheld the original verdict, ruling that Colby's guilt had been established beyond a reasonable doubt. This decision reinforced the legal precedent that digital evidence could be pivotal in modern criminal investigations. Colby was transferred to a maximum security prison to begin his life sentence. Prison officials reported that he initially struggled to adjust, displaying signs of anger and defiance. He refused to interact with other inmates and often isolated himself over time. However, the structured environment and strict routines began to temper his behavior. Counseling sessions focused on accountability, anger management, and understanding the consequences of his actions were offered. But Colby largely remained withdrawn. The media coverage of the case did not wane. After the trial, news outlets revisited the story frequently, emphasizing the role of technology in solving crimes and the diligence of law enforcement in piecing together Melody's final movements. Documentaries, podcasts, and articles highlighted the use of Fitbit and phone data, drone surveillance, and forensic reconstruction as an integrated investigative approach. Melody Rohr's name became synonymous with the message that even the most meticulous crimes could be unraveled with patience, collaboration, and technology. Melody's family, meanwhile, became advocates for missing persons and road safety awareness. Richard Rohr, though grieving, channeled his energy into public speaking, sharing his experience with the community and emphasizing the importance of vigilance, tracking devices, and timely reporting when a loved one goes missing. The tragedy catalyzed legislation in the state to improve emergency response coordination and investigative resources for missing persons cases. In the years following his conviction, Colby filed multiple unsuccessful motions for sentence reduction, each time maintaining some level of denial or minimizing his actions. Prison psychologists observed that his evasion of responsibility was consistent with his behavior before and during the crime. Despite these motions, he remained incarcerated, with the courts affirming the severity of his actions and the necessity of lifelong imprisonment without parole. The case ultimately became a textbook study in criminal justice programs nationwide. It highlighted several key lessons: the value of integrating technological evidence into investigations, the importance of corroborating witness testimony, and the need for law enforcement to pursue even small inconsistencies in suspect accounts. Forensic science textbooks cited the case as a landmark example of modern investigative methodology, particularly the role of wearable technology in establishing timelines and movements of victims and suspects. Public memory of Melody Rohr remains strong, with her story serving as a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration for advocacy. Groups' annual memorial walks were organized in her honor, promoting road safety, pedestrian awareness, and digital tracking awareness for elderly and vulnerable populations. Through these efforts, her legacy endured, ensuring that the impact of her life and the tragedy of her death contributed to broader social awareness and systemic improvements. Colby Martin's life in prison remained quiet but heavily regulated, with minimal privileges. Letters he sent were carefully monitored, and he was subjected to routine psychological assessments, though some inmates attempted to provoke him. Colby kept mostly to himself, reflecting the profound isolation and consequences of his choices. The story of his crimes and the meticulous investigation that followed continued to be referenced in academic, legal, and law enforcement circles, serving as a stark reminder of the intersection between human behavior, technology, and justice. Senate, picking up the phone at 7:25 a.m. Meng's concern grew. She decided to call a neighbor, hoping someone had seen the children awake or noticed anything unusual. The neighbor, Mrs. Lim said she had not seen any of the Tan children outside or near the windows that morning, which was unusual for the eldest, Ko Kong, who often peeked out before school, alarmed. Ming tried calling her husband, but there was no response. Inside the Tan home, the children were already awake, but unaware of the danger that had quietly infiltrated their peaceful morning. An intruder had entered the house sometime after 6:45 a.m. Taking advantage of the absence of the parents, the suspect's movements were stealthy and calculated. Security cameras, though limited in 1979, would later reveal that the individual had scoped the neighborhood days prior. Memorizing the routines of the Tan family by 7:30 a.m., neighbors began noticing something off. The usually tidy front gate was slightly ajar, and there were signs of disturbance near the living room window. Mrs. Lim called the police, reporting the unusual activity. Officers arrived within minutes, but upon entering, they were met with a scene of unimaginable horror. All 4 children had been brutally attacked. The parents' absence had provided the perpetrator with a complete window of opportunity. Detectives quickly began canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing anyone who might have seen suspicious activity. They learned that a man had been observed loitering near the Tan residence for several mornings, claiming to be looking for a lost pet. His presence had gone largely unnoticed, dismissed as harmless. However, the description matched a known criminal in the area with a history of child-related offenses. Forensic team meticulously examined the crime scene. Blood evidence, fingerprints, and traces of forced entry indicated that the attack had been premeditated. The children had been restrained and moved within the house, suggesting that the perpetrator had specific intentions rather than committing a spontaneous act of violence. Despite the passage of time since the initial attack, investigators were determined to find any leads that could identify the suspect. Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded. Detectives followed multiple leads, tracking down individuals who had been in the area during the critical time frame. Forensic experts worked tirelessly to analyze fibers, hair samples, and fingerprints. The case drew nationwide attention, sparking fear and outrage in Singapore. Parents were warned to be extra vigilant, and authorities began reviewing child safety protocols for families where both parents were working. Ultimately, the breakthrough came when detectives discovered a unique pattern of behavior that linked several previous child-related crimes in the city to a single individual. Using a combination of witness testimony, physical evidence, and behavioral profiling, they were able to identify the suspect, who had been living inconspicuously in a nearby Interesting. Him required careful planning. Police coordinated a sting operation, ensuring that the suspect could be taken into custody without endangering others once in custody. The interrogation revealed chilling details about the planning and execution of the crime, as well as his prior offenses, which had gone unnoticed or unconnected due to the fragmented nature of law enforcement records at the time. The trial that followed became one of the most shocking and widely reported cases in Singapore's history. The court meticulously examined the evidence, including forensic analysis, eyewitness accounts, and the psychological evaluation of the perpetrator. The severity of the crime, the age of the victims, and the premeditated nature of the attack led to widespread calls for stronger penalties and child protection laws. Of painstaking investigation, the suspect was finally brought to trial. His name was Lim Tek Hok, a man in his late 20s with a disturbing criminal history. During interrogations, Lim admitted to scouting the Tan family home days before the attack, carefully observing the parents' routines to identify a window when the children would be alone. What shocked the investigators the most was the cold, methodical way he described entering the home and committing the crime, revealing a mind devoid of empathy. During the trial, prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence. Forensic teams demonstrated how blood spatter patterns, fingerprints, and fibers from the suspect's clothing matched those found at the scene. Testimonies from neighbors and friends painted a picture of Lim's obsessive behavior in the days leading up to the attack. Detective reports highlighted the premeditated nature of the crime, showing that this was not a spontaneous act of violence, but a carefully executed plan. One of the most harrowing parts of the trial was the presentation of the crime scene photographs, showing the 10 children in the positions they had been found. The images were graphic and deeply unsettling, leaving the courtroom silent as the gravity of the act sank and psychologists called in by the prosecution described Lim's psychological profile, identifying him as a predatory offender with antisocial tendencies. The defense attempted to argue that Lim's actions were impulsive, but the evidence of his careful planning and prior criminal behavior made this defense untenable. As the trial progressed, the public followed every development closely. Singaporeans were horrified by the brutality of the crime, particularly because it targeted innocent children. The case sparked intense discussions about child safety, parental responsibility, and the adequacy of laws to protect minors when both parents were working. Media coverage emphasized the need for structural changes to prevent such tragedies in the future. In the final days of the trial, the prosecution presented Lim's prior criminal record, which included attempted abduction and assaults on minors. The court noted that Lim had shown a pattern of targeting children and escalating behavior over time. The judge described the crime as a calculated act of unimaginable cruelty and stressed that it struck at the very heart of family and community trust. Ultimately, Lim Tek Hok was found guilty of multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and assault. Given the severity of the offenses, the court sentenced him to death, making it clear that the punishment reflected both the gravity of the crime and the societal imperative to protect children. The verdict was met with relief and a sense of justice by the Tan family, law enforcement, and the public, though the emotional scars from the tragedy would remain for decades. The aftermath of the case led to significant changes in Singapore's child protection policies. Laws were amended to require better monitoring of children when both parents were working, and awareness campaigns were launched to educate families about safety precautions. Schools and community centers strengthened programs to keep children safe and provide support for families balancing work and child supervision. Though the tragedy of the Tan family remained one of Singapore's darkest chapters, the investigation, trial, and reforms that followed served as a crucial turning point. It demonstrated the importance of meticulous police work, forensic science, and community vigilance, while reinforcing the principle that justice must be pursued relentlessly, even in the face of unspeakable horror. In early 2018, a chilling discovery in rural Pennsylvania shook an otherwise quiet community. Residents of a small town near Lancaster County reported a foul odor coming from a dilapidated farmhouse on the outskirts. When local law enforcement arrived, they were confronted with a scene that would haunt them for months. Inside the house, they found the lifeless body of 42-year-old Sarah Whitman, a single mother of 2, who had been missing for nearly 3 weeks. The home was in disarray, with broken furniture, scattered personal items, and signs of a violent struggle. Detectives immediately launched a thorough investigation. The first step was to establish Sarah's movements before her disappearance. Interviews with neighbors revealed that she had last been seen leaving a grocery store late in the evening on a chilly March night. Surveillance footage showed her walking to her car, but she never arrived home. Her cell phone was inactive shortly after 8:15 p.m., and there were no signs of forced entry at her residence, suggesting she had been lured or followed. Police obtained a warrant to search Harlow's property upon entering. They discovered a hidden room behind a false wall in his basement. Inside were items belonging to Sarah, her wallet, shoes, and personal effects meticulously stored. More disturbingly, investigators found detailed journals and photographs indicating Harlow had been obsessively tracking Sarah's routines for months. There were diagrams showing her walking routes, grocery store visits, and even the times she left her home. This level of preparation confirmed premeditation beyond any doubt. Forensic analysis of the basement revealed blood traces that matched Sarah's DNA, along with fibers from clothing she had been wearing the night she disappeared. Harlow's truck contained hair strands, fingerprints, and other biological evidence linking him directly to Sarah's murder, despite initially denying any involvement. Harlow eventually confessed after being confronted with the overwhelming forensic evidence. His confession revealed a chilling sequence. He had lured Sarah to the farmhouse under the guise of needing help with car repairs, administered sedatives to incapacitate her, and then committed the murder following the crime. He had stored her personal belongings in the hidden room to cover up evidence and delay discovery. The trial was one of the most high-profile in the region that year. Prosecutors painted a picture of a man driven by obsession and control. Methodical in his planning and execution, the defense attempted to argue diminished responsibility due to alleged mental health issues, but the evidence of careful premeditation, surveillance, and the use of sedatives negated any claim of impulsivity. Witness testimonies, digital records, and forensic evidence left no room for doubt. Ultimately, Brian Harlow was convicted of first-degree murder and multiple counts of obstruction of justice. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The case highlighted the dangers of obsessive behavior escalating into violent crime and emphasized the importance of digital and forensic evidence in modern criminal investigations. In the wake of Sarah's murder, the community established awareness programs focused on the warning signs of abusive or controlling relationships. Local law enforcement worked with social services to educate residents about the dangers of stalking, coercive behavior, and the importance of reporting suspicious activities early. The tragic story of Sarah Whitman served as a grim reminder of how quickly obsession can turn deadly, and how meticulous investigative work combining forensics, digital tracking, and witness interviews can bring perpetrators to justice. Yet each child with extreme violence, investigators concluded that the motive was not robbery or revenge, and the apartment had been taken or damaged. The killer's focus appeared purely on murder, and the precision and intensity of the slashes suggested both preparation and an almost ritualistic intent. Police meticulously examined the scene for fingerprints, footprints, or any trace that could indicate forced entry, but none were found. The wooden and iron doors were locked from the inside, meaning the perpetrator had either possessed a key, been let in willingly, or had exceptional knowledge of the apartment layout. Nothing in the immediate vicinity suggested that the children had screamed or fought before the attack. The parents' later testimony indicated they had been unaware of the assault. Entirely forensic experts also noted a chilling detail. The killer had wiped the floors clean of fingerprints, but had left small streaks of blood that indicated movement paths, which could help reconstruct the attack. The blood pattern suggested that the perpetrator attacked each child systematically, moving from one to the next, targeting specific areas such as the head, neck, and torso. These details hinted at a calculated and controlled assault, not an impulsive act of rage. The investigation quickly expanded to the surrounding neighborhood. Detectives interviewed neighbors, nearby shopkeepers, and anyone who might have noticed unusual activity early that morning. Several witnesses reported seeing a man loitering near the Tan family's apartment around 6:50 to 7:10 a.m. Someone who didn't match the description of any family friend or relative. He was described as medium height, wearing a dark jacket and cap, and seemed to be observing the apartment rather than walking past. Additionally, investigators found faint shoe prints near a side alley, connected to the apartment's back entrance. Comparison of these prints suggested the use of work boots with a unique tread pattern combined with witness accounts. This led police to hypothesize that the killer had entered the apartment through the back door, likely using knowledge of the building's layout to avoid detection. The crime's brutal nature shocked the city, with newspapers reporting it as one of the most horrifying family murders in Singapore's history. Public fear and outrage intensified, and authorities placed additional resources into tracking down the perpetrator. Criminal psychologists were called in to profile the attacker, concluding that the person responsible exhibited traits of extreme psychopathy, a lack of empathy, meticulous planning, and a fixation on controlling or harming children. Over the following weeks, detectives pieced together a timeline. The children had likely been attacked while still asleep. Given the lack of defensive injuries on furniture or doors, the parents' absence was exploited with cold precision. Investigators suspected the killer had prior knowledge of the family's routine, as the timing and method of entry indicated premeditation. Police released sketches and descriptions of the suspected individual. Based on witness accounts, community patrols were increased, and any unusual behavior in nearby neighborhoods was monitored. Investigators also reviewed records for anyone with a criminal history related to violent offenses, obsession with children, or familiarity with the apartment's layout. As the investigation continued, a breakthrough occurred when detectives discovered that one of the neighbors had seen a delivery man, a man with a similar description to the sketch, entering the apartment building several days before the murders under the pretext of delivering packages. This raised suspicions that the killer may have used the guise of work or delivery to study the family's routine and the apartment layout in advance. The case eventually became a high-priority investigation, combining forensic analysis, witness testimony, and behavioral profiling to locate the perpetrator. Detectives emphasized the importance of small details, the pattern of wounds, traces of blood, shoe prints, and prior surveillance of the family. Each element slowly began to build a picture of a killer who was not only violent but meticulously Tan family tragedy left an indelible mark on Singaporean society, prompting debates about child safety, parental supervision, and security in residential areas. Police warned communities to remain vigilant, while social services implemented additional checks to ensure families were protected from potential threats. Detectives worked tirelessly, following every lead from witness accounts, physical evidence, and behavioral profiling. After weeks of painstaking investigation, they identified a man whose profile matched all key indicators: 27-year-old Olai Hawk, a former employee in a nearby factory. Hawk had a known history of violence and obsession with children, but his crimes had never escalated beyond minor assault. Learned that Hawk had been living in a rented room a few blocks from the Tan family apartment. Surveillance and interviews revealed that he had frequently walked past the apartment in the mornings, ostensibly on his way to work, but actually observing the family's routine. Investigators discovered that he had memorized the parents' departure times, the children's sleeping arrangements, and even the timing of neighborly visits, confirming the premeditation evident in the attack on February 2, 1979. Officers executed a coordinated raid on Hawk's residence. Inside, they found clothing and shoes matching bloodstains and traces from the crime scene. Most chilling of all, they discovered a set of knives, a cleaver, and detailed notes outlining hypothetical plans that mirrored the brutal attack on the Tan children. Hawk was arrested without resistance, though he offered no explanation, his blank expression unnervingly calm during interrogation. Hawk initially denied involvement, insisting he had never been near the apartment that morning. But when detectives confronted him with the physical evidence, bloodstains on his shoes, fibers on his clothing matching the children's school uniforms, and the sequence of footprints leading from the back alley to the bathroom, he began to crumble. Psychologists on the case noted that his confession was delayed and fragmented, indicative of someone attempting to rationalize their actions rather than show remorse. Eventually, Hawk admitted to entering the apartment through the back door, attacking the children with premeditated intent. He revealed a disturbing fascination with control and violence, stating that he had been planning the attack for weeks. According to Hawk, the act was not personal. The children had been symbolic targets in his warped fantasies. Detectives later concluded that his mental state reflected extreme psychopathy, compounded by obsessive tendencies toward children.